one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. That brings us to public comments. This is an opportunity to speak on an item that is not on the agenda, but within the purview of the city of Lafayette. And I do have a request to speak from Lauren Herpich.
Hi, Council. Lauren Herbick, 3382 Moraga Boulevard. On behalf of the Lafayette Historical Society, I'd like to invite you and your families and all the families of Lafayette to our second annual Breakfast with Santa. It will be on Sunday, December 15th from 8:30 a.m. till 10 at Sideboard Lafayette, which is the home of the original Pioneer store of Lafayette. So very fitting that the Historical Society would have our breakfast there. So we'll have Santa, photos for Santa, off the menu pancakes. So these are pancakes that you cannot get at Sideboard any other day, only at the Breakfast with Santa. Coloring sheets for kids, and then also a silent auction, which will consist of items donated by so many of our local merchants here in town. So it's a great way to support the community, bid on some items, help our small businesses, and just have a really great day overall. And then every person who comes also gets a year membership with the Lafayette Historical Society. So it's a great organization. So hopefully you can join us, and I'll keep flyers in the back for anybody who's interested.
That's great. Thank you, Lauren. Any
Thanks.
questions for the speaker? Thank you very much.
Ho, ho, ho.
Okay, ho, ho, ho it is.
Not yet, not yet.
Would anyone else like to speak under public comment? Well, you can go ahead and then fill out a sheet afterwards. Thank you.
Ginny Birendal, 3212 Otega Avenue, Lafayette. I received a notice that we're going to have a planned PG&E outage on Wednesday. Can
Yes.
you
Speak
have?
into the microphone.
You need to pull the mic a little closer to your face. Go- just
Just bend it.
just
bend
bend it towards you. There you go.
The planned PG outage on Wednesday at 9 o'clock. What information do you have to share with us?
Well, I think that is all the information we have, is that it's going to possibly be 9 o'clock on Wednesday through to at least Thursday morning, the next morning. That's all that I've seen, and that came from our police chief earlier today. So I don't have any information beyond that.
And so I guess we should just check the PG&E website?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
got it.
I think the normal process would be to go on that site, put in your address. You can see if you're in the affected area or not, and then we'll just see how long it actually exists.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Okay. Would anyone else like to speak under public comment? All right. So with that, we'll come to our hearing on the appeal by Lisa and Jon Williams of the Planning Commission's approval of L04-17. This is the car wash facility at the Shell station, Stanley Blvd. And if we could have the staff report, that would be great.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members. The item before you is the appeal of L04-17. It was last heard by the Council on the October 15, 2019 meeting, where the Council unanimously voted to continue the item to today's date, giving some direction to the applicant to provide some additional information and revised plans, as well as directing staff to look into a few areas of interest. So we can go into the points, each point that was requested and how they have addressed each point. First, the applicant was directed to address on-site circulation issues, specifically to demonstrate how being parked at the southern pumps would be able to turn north and then east into the queuing lane, so going from south east into the queuing lane. The applicant has provided a number of exhibits showing the various turning radii on site and demonstrating how those turns can be made. The exhibit that was requested by council can be found as Exhibit 1, and that shows that there's significant area to turn from the southern pumps into the queuing lane. Some other exhibits demonstrate turning into the project site from Pleasant Hill Road, turning into the project site from Stanley Boulevard, exiting the project site into Stanley Boulevard. So we've gone over these exhibits with engineering staff, and yes, each one of these turns can be accomplished in the ideal scenario where there's only one car on site and that turn is made perfect. But given when there's multiple cars on site and multiple turning paths conflicting at the same time, that can be more of a challenge. The next item that was requested was a cross-section demonstrating the relationship between the subject property and the southern property owner to the southeast, 1163 Pleasant Hill Circle. And there is a cross-section A2.2, which shows a cut through the car wash, and then showing the relationship between the car wash, the sound wall, and the adjacent property owner to the south. So you'll see that there's about a 10-foot drop going from the subject property down into 1163. And if we go to, can we go to one? Next sheet, please. So this demonstrates the sound wall, and there's a 10-foot difference. So going from the lower elevation at existing grade, looking up into the wall, although it's a 10-foot wall, given the grade change, you would appear to see a wall that's more around 20 feet high. There's cuts going through the car wash, going through the retail space, and going to the queuing lane as well. Next was the photometric plan. The applicant has submitted an updated photometric plan that was referenced in the last meeting, but has been provided here tonight. And that will demonstrate a decrease in light exposure at the southern property line, again, with that affected neighbor. In the previous plan, the light exposure was 0.8 foot candles, and that's been decreased to 0.4. The applicant would be happy to speak on that and discuss some of the differences there. The last item was for the applicant to confirm the requested hours of operation for the retail space. Currently, it operates 24 hours a day, and the applicant has requested to maintain that 24-hour day operation. As part of staff's research, we've looked into previous approvals, and if there's any conditions of approval that would limit the retail space operation hours, and we haven't found any. So it's existing as 24, and it's proposed as 24. Those were the items that were requested by the applicant, and the council directed staff to look into a few areas of interest. One is to explain the difference between the manufacturer's specifications of noise, what the manufacturer can guarantee as a noise output, and then the difference between the MMD's noise study. So you may recall from the last meeting that the council identified a pretty significant difference in what the manufacturer guaranteed versus what was produced. Rincon, the environmental consultant, has prepared a memo that addresses that in detail, but in summary, the model that was used for the environmental document took the most conservative output from the manufacturer's specifications, but took into account the walls of the car wash, the adjacent buildings and topography, and a 6-foot sound wall. So that's the reason why there's a difference between those two numbers. The council asked staff to review the proposed parking plan for compliance with the parking ordinance, and we found that the application was submitted and deemed complete in early 2018 prior to the adoption of our current parking ordinance, so we applied pre-2018 parking standards. Based on that former ordinance, it would require 1 parking space per 250 square feet of retail, 1 per 250 square feet of automotive cleaning, and 1 per 250 square feet of automotive servicing. For automotive servicing, that's the car wash, that's the gas station itself, so the canopy. And we found that although the ordinance says 1 per 250 square feet, it's a use that in reality, the demand and supply is totaled out. So the canopy provides 8 pumps and 8 spaces one car can only park at a time, so it evens out. And we took that into consideration. Next was the car wash. And although, again, it's one space per 250 square feet, this is a use that can be started and finished entirely within your car. So you can go through the queuing lane, go through the washers, dryers, and then exit the site without needing additional parking. And we took that into consideration as well. So that leaves us with just the retail component. The ordinance talks about net floor area as the standard. That excludes corridors, mechanical rooms, bathrooms. So the area that's left to calculate on is 381 square feet. That's the retail space in the private office. That would require 2 spaces where they're currently providing 6. So yes, the project is compliant with the parking ordinance. The sub-question to that, what the council asked, do the spaces for those services, including air and water, vacuuming, does the accessible space, does that count as well? We looked into that, and our ordinance does not address those specific areas, but we found that the vacuum, the air and water, those are ancillary uses to the main use, which is automotive servicing, so we should count those as well. Those are unrestricted parking, so you could park there if you're going to the retail space. That's just an additional use. So we've counted those as well. And the accessible space, that's the space that is required by federal law, and we found if we don't count that space, we're making it more difficult for compliance with federal law, and that's not the intent of the ordinance as well. The last thing that the council asked us to look at was installing a crosswalk near the subject property to discourage jaywalking. We refer this question to the city traffic consultant, who has stated that if a crosswalk is put in, it's recommended that it's located east of the most eastern entrance into Acalanes High School. And the reason behind that is between the intersection and that entrance into Acalanes, that's the most inundated with traffic on Stanley Boulevard. So locating outside of that would reduce the amount of vehicle to pedestrian conflicts. With that being said, staff finds that if you're locating a crosswalk in that area away from the subject property, it doesn't really address the concern that we have. There's an existing jaywalking problem with students going from the parking lot, crossing the street to the convenience store. This project, with moving it closer to Stanley Boulevard, providing that direct path to the sidewalk, is going to further that jaywalking, and moving across or locating a crosswalk away from that doesn't provide an alternative to solve that problem. It's not a more convenient alternative. Staff has received 28 public comments, which are included in the staff report. Several more comments were submitted after production of the staff report. Those have been sent to the council. Additional copies are available in the back. Staff's recommendation is consistent, or remains consistent. While the project impacts could be reduced to a less than significant level under CEQA, the proposed car wash would impose previously non-existent impacts on the adjacent residential properties. Given the constraints of the site and proximity of sensitive receptors, staff is unable to make the required findings for approval. The council will consider the record, take additional public testimony, and deliberate on the matter and provide direction to staff. We're here for any questions. Representatives of Rincon and Kittleson and Associates are also here. Thank you.
Okay, do we have questions for staff? Councilmember Bliss?
First of all, thank you for the report, staff. Very helpful. To frame the discussion tonight, I have 2 questions, both of which concern just how people and automobiles move on the site under the current proposal. So the one thing I want to clarify is that striped column, which is sort of heading vertically on the drawing, that's just to the left of the auto driveway into the car wash. So it's basically, it's what was, yeah, just a little bit to the right, sorry. That, I recall from October 15th, that was a sidewalk intended to serve the retail business. Is that still, and I just want to clarify that under the revised proposal, or under this proposal, that remains the
Yeah.
main sort of walking route that's intended to direct people from that sidewalk to the
Correct.
the retail.
Under the existing site plan, there's a crosswalk or a path, dedicated path that connects more to the west towards the intersection that's being relocated to the eastern. So that provides a direct path from the sidewalk to the retail space.
Okay. And my other question is, you mentioned in your report, and this is in the written report as well, but you mentioned in your remarks that the turns that need to be made on the site to get from the gas pumps into the car wash, in particular, can be made. The turning radiuses, in theory, can be made, and so you made the point that if there's no traffic or no cars on the site, that from a sort of technical, like geometric standpoint, they could be made. But you also noted that when there are some measure of cars or some amount of traffic on the site, that making those turns could pose challenges. And so I wanted to just elaborate on that a little bit. I know one thing that's mentioned in the written report is that, which I assume is a less than ideal way of cars moving, would be that potentially when other cars are on the site, that cars that are leaving the southern gas pumps and heading west, they might need to actually exit the western curb cut and then circulate back onto Stanley Boulevard and then come back into the eastern curb cut to access the car wash.
That's correct.
Correct? Okay.
If a car is facing west at the southern pumps and each of the pumps is taken up in the middle area, that leaves about 9 feet to maneuver through. And if you go to the northern pumps, that can only fit one car, and passing between that parked car and the sidewalk leaves a little room. So if you want to enter to the car wash, you would have to exit the site from the western driveway, re-enter from the eastern driveway.
Okay. And my other question then, so picking up on that, and you mentioned that it was, I think your phrase, which I really appreciated, was, said it could pose some challenges when you have a number of cars on the site. Other than that, that maneuver that would be needed, which would basically be putting more cars back onto Stanley headed sort of eastbound across that gap between the western curb cut and the eastern curb cut. Are there other challenges or other issues that are raised by the required turn radiuses when there are actually cars on the site that you can think of?
If you take a look at the southern pumps, under existing conditions, there's about 20 feet of space between the bollard and the retail component. With the proposed car wash, more facilities are going on the property. It's becoming more constrained. That reduces from about 20 feet to 13 feet, leaving fewer space for a car to pass.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the additional areas that we looked at.
Okay, that's all I have for now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Other questions for staff? Vice Mayor Candell?
Yes, thank you very much. You asked the same questions, like which is the one that is the most troublesome, and I think you pulled that out. Thank you. In your presentation, you talked about the parking, and at one point you said there are 6 spots.
Correct.
Where are those 6 spots? I only see 4.
There are 3 in the lower left-hand corner, one for
Uh-huh.
air, one for water, one standard.
Right.
There's one in the top left that is adjacent to the refueling area for those larger trucks.
Oh, I see. It's
In the
just
top
marked
left.
with the little X's.
Correct.
Like these? Oh,
So
okay.
that's
All right.
4. There is one that's adjacent to the retail for employees, and then there's the ADA space. So that's 6. So even if we only consider,
Okay.
if we don't count those other services in the ADA space, we're still left with required to and provided to unmarked for general use.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't see the other one. So on the crosswalks, are you actually endorsing Chuck DeLue's decision to put one in there next to the high school or not? I was unclear at your explanation.
I think the question that was asked of Mr. DeLu, the consulting traffic engineer, was if continuing the hatched pathway from the site across to the north, with a little leeway east or west, to address the jaywalking was an option. And essentially the answer that came back was no. Putting in a crosswalk there would be dangerous because of all the car movements and traffic. So really the only appropriate place to put a north-south crosswalk would be east of the eastern entrance. So
And
well
so that you're
down,
endorsing that.
well
That's
down
what-
the street. And I think the follow-on question is to what degree would that be used? I mean, you could, if pedestrians are traveling eastbound and desire to cross the street, they can do so at the stop-controlled intersection at Camino Diablo.
So you're not endorsing putting that crosswalk in at all? Just keeping whatever's there and not touching it?
Yeah, I don't know that planning staff has a position on the north-south crosswalk that would be well east of the project site, as it wouldn't, in our opinion, ameliorate what we see as a conflict.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Councilmember Geringer?
So I will have some more questions about circulation. Most of the, but I do want to hear some of this public comment. But all of these studies show coming on and the let me choose these words, challenges, as you stated them, to actually circulating through here, going into the car wash, if there are other cars on here. And had there been, in looking at it from the engineering perspective from staff, looking at what happens when the cars that are on the property are actually out already into Stanley because of the backing up on the property, and the impact of that, and where those sort of backups or queues might be. And then I will have a statement after, but.
Yes, we did go over the hypothetical if the property is inundated with cars, how does that affect Stanley and Pleasant Hill? Particularly if cars are backed up on the northern pumps, the northern two, then the turning left, going westbound on Stanley, turning left is more of a challenge. And if the pumps are stalled at the southern spot, then going northbound, turning right on Pleasant Hill Road becomes a challenge. Those were the two areas that we looked at.
Okay, so thank you. I think that's that for now. And right now, thank you for confirming the hours of operation for the retail space. So the hours that currently, when the retail space is open 24/7, correct?
Correct.
And are the pumps open that same time?
I believe so. The applicant may be able to touch on that, but I believe it's...
No.
Because I have noticed, actually, so from personal experience recently, so that's what is making me, I actually needed to go, but they were blocked off. And so I was just wondering if that was a regular thing, but currently the reality is that the retail space and the pumps to be able to pump gas are open 24/7 unless something's going on and they're blocked.
The applicant may be better to speak
Okay.
to that.
So we can hold that one, but thank you.
Okay, well, I was happy to receive the circulation drawings, and I appreciate that from the applicant. And what I was concerned about is whether or not these patterns of circulation on-site were at all considered when the mitigated negative deck draft was actually put in place. Do we have any sense of whether that was part of the thinking in the statement assessing impact of this project?
These turning radii exhibits were produced after the M&D. We have representatives from Kittleson and Associates that conducted the traffic study, so they can speak to that.
Okay. Well, I guess the reason I'm just kind of going back to this is that we lose a major queuing space with the addition, with the changes in the project. Right now, there's a very large queuing space that people can go to wait to get their chance to either get on Stanley or to get out of the way of those who are coming in from Stanley Boulevard. With this proposal, that all gets reduced to a 30-foot lane. And in just looking at the turning movements, many of the turning movements actually kind of violate the 15-foot middle line. They kind of go across that a little bit. In fact, some go completely across it. And it would just seem that those kinds of conflicts could lead to backups that would in fact create potential problems off-site. The reason I think this is legitimately a concern is that we have a system already in place at the end of Happy Valley Road at the shopping center, where Happy Valley Road dead ends at Mount Delta Boulevard into the shopping center. There's a very small queuing space. We often get cars backed up within the parking area, which then ends up reflecting on queuing up on the left turn lane from Mount Delta Boulevard, or people even getting in from the right turn lane heading east. So I'm concerned that we may be creating a new situation very similar to that if we haven't really looked at this in some detail. So I guess the question is, have we looked at this at some detail using the information we have now?
Not to the degree that the traffic analysis does in the CEQA document. We've had conversations with the city engineer who has reviewed it, the engineering service manager, Matt Luttrup. And I think we shared his comments with the commission and certainly informed our report that in an ideal, uncongested configuration, movements can be made. But that's not necessarily reality, and when cars are on site and congestion ensues, they become challenging to nearly impossible in some circumstances.
So I guess in looking at the draft mitigating negative deck, page 96, we've got several different circulation assessments that lead to a less than significant impact statement, but there's nothing that really talks about the queuing on site. So do you think this is something that has been assessed or needs to be assessed?
I would refer that question to our
Okay, excellent.
secret consultant.
And I guess the other piece I'm concerned about is the crosswalk. So if the crosswalk is not a good location for a crosswalk, then it's obviously not a good location for jaywalking either. Who ends up being responsible when someone gets hit crossing the street? Is it the city's responsibility? Or does it end up being an attractive nuisance question that the Shell station has set people up to make a crossing at that location by extending the access at that location?
I don't have a good answer for you now. I'd have to double check and get back to you.
Okay. Well, it seems like that's important. I mean, I know that we have people jaywalking on Mount Delta Boulevard, but hopefully we do things to discourage that, either through enforcement or you put up a barrier or something, because it's not safe. And this is a condition that probably is not safe either, because it doesn't make sense to put a crosswalk there. So I'm a little concerned that we may have an issue that's a potential liability for someone in the room. I'm not sure who it is, but clearly it's a liability we should be concerned about. Okay. Any other questions of staff? All right, with that, we'll give the applicant 10 minutes for a presentation. Well, I was told the applicant, but is it appellant? Okay. Well, I will go with your judgment. We have the appellant for 10 minutes, please.
Okay. Can I take the cord back?
go. Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council members, thank you again for your time this evening. So when I first, in late September, when this first came up as a potential change to the site across the street from the Auckland High School, the first thing I did was I sat down with Travis Bell, who's obviously the Auckland High School principal. And we talked about the traffic congestion, we talked about student safety, and he agreed that as we go on, the traffic gets worse, it has an impact on the students. In doing so, he thought that it would be a good idea to have me walk over to the journalism team. And in that time, I got to sit in front of the journalism team. I got to specifically sit with one of the writers named Catherine, and she interviewed me, and she shared some of the comments that was published in the student newspaper. So I'd like to read some of those quotes. Akalani students have also expressed concern regarding the proposal. Many believe that the new car wash development will affect student life significantly. The student quotes, "It would definitely make it more dangerous for students to walk or bike to school as more cars would be present. It will also make traffic much worse in an intersection that already makes it hard to get to school on time." It states the necessity of the car wash is also being questioned due to the existing car washes in downtown Lafayette. Well, I tend to agree. And the reason I point that out because it is important to know where some of the students are worried with their own well-being. Now, this is a video that I'm going to share, and Mayor Anderson, you asked a lot of the questions that I was concerned about, and Mr. Bliss as well, is the site circulation and what these students are doing. Before I show this video, I will comment that this was done a week ago. I drove around the premises 3 times, and I captured video. And in that video, I saw 20 jaywalkers, 3 kids were on bikes, 1 kid was on a scooter, and there was about 14 or 15 students that had stood in front of the retail center with their backpacks off, almost using the site as an extension of the high school. So I'll play the video for everyone to watch. And you notice that everyone to get on that side of the street had to illegally walk across the street.
Interesting.
Again, this is in one day. And that's not including anyone that I saw farther down. Again, this is where the proposed crosswalk was mentioned. And if you can see on the other side of the street, there's no room. Even if you were to put a crosswalk in anywhere on that street, there's no sidewalk. And from what I can see, there's barely enough space to even put a trash can. About 3 weeks before that, I was notified by some friends that it looked like there was a car accident in the middle of the street. Now again, I could not find a traffic report. I did not see the car accident or anything else other than debris that was littered in the street. But again, if you notice where this area was, it was right in front of the gas station, right between the gas station and the high school. Ironically, as I was taking the picture, one of the students illegally walked across the street exactly where this conflict point was for a car. Now, when I see these videos and I see these pictures, it just makes me upset. Again, what we talked about, as Mayor Anderson highlighted, the current site that we have right now, there is space there. The students are there, they have their backpacks off, they're hanging out, they're enjoying themselves, but there is space to navigate. There's space for them to get out of the way of cars, to be visible to cars, and there's space for larger cars that do come on this premises from time to time to navigate this area. One of my biggest arguments is the new site plan that they're proposing is dramatically worse than we currently have. As more and more students keep continuing to walk across the street, they're going to be faced with this. We spoke about this. You have a giant tunnel, so as the cars come in here, the students come in here, there's nowhere to go. And if you see some of the students, they're just hanging out, they're enjoying themselves, where are they going to stay? Are they going to be getting into the queue? Are they going to be standing in the handicap area? Are they going to be getting away these cars that have to make a perfect maneuver? You just have to be too perfect in this area as a driver and as a student and any other pedestrian. So one item I want to show here, we talked a lot about noise, and I don't know if we have the volume on, so maybe I'll just briefly discuss this. But we talked a lot about noise and its effect on the residences. But the one area of noise where, I'll just skip this through, that we didn't talk about is the on-site noises that people will experience in some of these areas that have high conflict from cars, from pedestrians. If you look at this here, this is specifically of a vacuum. And if you look at the red star, these are readings from 20 feet away of a vacuum. And if you can see, some of these numbers are hard to read. This says 71, this says 67, and this is 67. These are different versions of a vacuum and the noise that it emits at 20 feet away. This right here is what's also on site, as we know, with the Quiet Kit installed, the exit of the car wash tunnel. And if you're focusing from the center to 45 degrees of the exit, from 60 feet away, and this is an important number because this is the length of the exit of the car wash to where the pedestrians are walking on the western side of the property along the crosswalk, or excuse me, along the sidewalk, you're experiencing levels of 70 on a dBA LEQ level. Now in the MND, it states that anything above 65 dBA LEQ is enough to distract or disrupt the conversation. Now that noise is a very loud noise, and if you look at those two items that I spoke about, the exit of the car wash and the vacuum, well, you have a massive amount of flow of individuals that are walking along the sidewalk right here, and you have people that are coming through on their bikes, students, pedestrians, in a site that has noted from the Mickelson report, there is conflict there. There is vehicle-to-vehicle and pedestrian vehicle conflict points from people that are walking from the retail center, people backing up. So really, you have to be on your high sensory level to be able to hear and look out to make sure you don't have any incident with a car. Just to see what some of those items look like. This is the car that pulled up, and there's 3 students getting into the car as a pickup level. If they're experiencing levels exiting from the car wash and the vacuum cleaner continuously running, could the car that was backing up hear them? Are they as aware of their surroundings as they should be? This is a perfect example. You have 3 cars that are lined up in a queue. They're trying to get out the western entrance of the property. There's an individual here walking with his friend on his bike. If these cars with their windows down here, as well as the pedestrian, are walking through the area and they're also experiencing higher levels that are loud enough to disrupt a conversation, what does that do to their sensory level as they're walking through this area? And again, at the corner of the crosswalk, this is where the students continually stand. The reason I highlight this, what if the city at some point wants to address the items that are allowing the crosswalk for the signal? And if you wanted to update that for someone that was visually impaired that needed to be able to hear the trigger of saying it's time to walk across the street, at this point, it's still it's over 65. So again, if you're standing here, given the measurements from the factory on those 2 items, you're going to be distracted from the noise. Now, we never talked about that. So you have conflict points of pedestrians and people walking through. And frankly, there's a lot of students that walk down south of this property, and I see them all day long. So if they're walking in front of this, as these cars are frustrated, they're feeling stranded, they're trying to dart out in the middle of traffic, and you're walking down this way, and they're not paying attention, and they can't hear you, or the driver's distracted, that presents us another safety issue. Another safety issue that was, actually, I'm going to go quickly to this. In 2005, this property had a leaking underground storage tank. It's called an LUST. Now, the cleanup that had to be used on this property was to get rid of the contamination concern, which was gasoline. The cleanup involved several tons of material that was excavated from the property. Now, this was closed out in 2013. The case was closed. But the reason to highlight this is a 30-year-old gas station, and it's hard to see here, but these are the construction vibration impacts from an environmental perspective. And I don't know if you can see there where it says 100 VDA, VDB, and that's based on vibration levels. At 100, it can cause physical damage to a building. Now keep in mind, in the MND, these are some of the items that are highlighted. This is 94. You're getting awfully close to a level that can create physical destruction on a property. The question I have, leaky underground storage tank, what kind of effects does the vibration from the construction, if it ever gets to that point, have on anything that's going on underneath the property? Is the soil contaminated? Can the water potentially mix as it's running off from the car wash? And what kind of issue can that come up with? We go back here. Really quickly, another item, this is our property, the property line, the queue. This right here is the activation buzzer. And I don't know if we had the sound on the audio from the video. But this was completely disregarded in some of the sound studies because it was mentioned that this was never going to be loud enough or louder than the sounds of the entrance or the exit. So it was disregarded as a potential area of noise. Now there it was right there. I think that must be my wife on her cell phone, but you get an idea there. It's a shot clock buzzer. Now I consulted with a sound consultant that was a part of this, San Luis Obispo in California. He said that the first thing he asked me was about the buzzer. I'll finish my thought here and then.
Please do.
He said that the sound consultant said, I've been monitoring sound coming from car washes for many years. You need to understand and get a better idea of what that sound is like coming because it's a different noise. It's not a muffled noise. It's a high-pitched noise that can overtake the sound of everything else that's happening on the car wash. The second that activation light goes on and off, we can hear it. We've heard it on a lot of those other car washes, and it's a loud noise. So all those other items that are going to be affecting us, that's just another one that's going to be affecting our livelihood as we're in our backyard trying to enjoy ourselves on our property.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
All right, are there questions for the speaker? Councilmember Bliss.
Yeah, I just had one question. So thanks for the presentation and the remarks. And it was helpful to see those videos, the compilation video you showed. Do you happen to know offhand or remember roughly sort of what time of day that was that you had those various segments?
I get home every day because of market hours. I'm between 3 and 4 o'clock. Mm-hmm. So we're very close to 3 o'clock.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much. Okay, we have the applicant for 10 minutes.
And apologies, there was audio as part of the presentation, but our system doesn't accept it from this connection. So I think during the rebuttal, they may play a video or audio from a mobile phone that we can put through the regular PA system.
Mr. Bowie.
Good evening. My name is David Bowie. I'm an attorney on behalf of Vanita Bindal, who's the applicant in this particular project. I did have a few comments, obviously, I did wish to make, one of which is simply this. Ms. Bindal has been involved in a fairly extensive process for the city of Lafayette, which actually dates back to 2016. Because it was in 2016 that this council made the legislative determination to rezone this property. And the rezoning says exactly what the use is permitted for this property. And when you talk about that use, it's very specific. It specifically includes the ancillary use of the retail space. It also includes, with a use permit, the right to have a car wash. That was very important in 2016. We made an extensive presentation about the necessity to keep a viable gas station that required the potential for a car wash. We understood that if there were adverse impacts, they would have to be mitigated. But nonetheless, that was something that we presented to this council. This council at that time made the legislative determination that that was a permissible use. I mention this because we're here today on what is called a quasi-adjudicative determination. It is something which requires factual determinations. It's not a matter of choice. It's not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of evidence. And I think that's very important to keep in mind. I've heard concerns about, the size of the car wash and a constrained site. I wonder if all of you remember that what we've really done here is we've added about 6,000 square feet to this site that currently is not being used at all. So when people are saying there's more space for the maneuvering of cars and vehicles and so forth, and it's less constrained now, that's not taking into account the fact that as we go through this process of remodeling this gas station, we will be adding about 1,366 square feet of car wash and ancillary building for the car wash. But against that addition, we're opening up 6,000 square feet of additional site, which is used for maneuvering and moving around. I think that's obviously more than offset by that. I also remember some concerns about interaction between queuing for the car wash and potential either car or pedestrian impacts. And the testimony that was given before relates to the fact that each car wash takes about 5 minutes to go through. that has a natural impediment to having large lines of queuing vehicles because people simply do not wait for that long. You can buy your car wash, you can come back at a time when it's not so congested. And that actually is what we're dealing with here. People adjust to existing circumstances. And I've heard a lot of concerns about tremendous congestion and what that might do to traffic. But that really, I think, is something apart from real circumstance where people adjust their needs and the need for getting a car wash, the need for using the gas station to existing conditions. I'd like to comment about the staff report because, frankly, I thought it was a very good report, this report. It talked about the circulation issues, and I've heard some speculation from staff that if everyone gets there at the same time and there are all kinds of cars, there could be some conflicts. What I think is most important are two things. Number one, the architect specializes in doing gas station development. That's his specialty. He's not changed any of the turning radiuses, nor has he changed any of the circulation patterns from the time this was first submitted to the environmental consultants. There's been no change on that. He did more detailed drawings, but he didn't change any of the actual circulation pattern itself. So they had that before them to consider it, as did the city engineer, who considered circulation. In the staff report in the first comment notes on-site circulation that was reviewed by engineering services staff, and they felt that it's appropriate. Again, that's evidence, it's not speculation. The cross sections on the second page of the staff report. It is certainly true there's a difference in grade between this property and the adjoining property, no question, but that'd be true no matter what. We've proposed a sound wall of 10 feet, but it's been made clear that the sound wall can be addressed by design review. More to the point, we don't need the sound wall for any kind of acoustics or noise study basis. It's not required. So as a result, if we have the sound wall, it's because you think it's appropriate, it's for the benefit of the neighbors. The site sections make perfectly clear that the vegetation between the properties blocks all views anyway. The other thing is, when you look at the actual view of the site as it will be redeveloped, what you have is a building that housed the retail was 14 feet tall. That building is now going to be removed. And what's going to be adjoining the property line for the appellants, the Williams, will be nothing but the queuing area. And the queuing area has no building or height to it. So not only can you not see it because of vegetation, but there's not actually a building there. You can obviously have a 6-foot wall or a 6-foot fence. You could have a 10-foot wall or a 10-foot fence. Both of those are improvements over existing circumstances. So how one could possibly say that's objectionable is a mystery to me. The photometric plan confirmed that we've done everything we need to do on that. Hours of operation, I would point out to you that the Planning Commission made the determination to limit the hours of operation, and we've accepted that. We have no problem with that. So we've addressed that particular issue. The point is that there are currently no limitations on hours of operation. We're happy to accept the limitation in terms of hours of operation for the car wash itself. Parking requirements, I think that's pretty clear cut that we've met all the requirements and then some. And the noise study, and again, that's very, very interesting because the noise study indicates that in the mitigated negative declaration, it indicates clearly that with the silencers, with the mitigation measures that we've proposed, we're way below the City of Lafayette sound standards. It's right there in the report, it's in the table. The result of that is kind of interesting because I hear concerns about sound, concerns about acoustics, but we're required to meet a standard. And we meet that standard and then some. As a result, if we meet the standard and we're actually below the standard, then how is sound an issue? It shouldn't be. That's not a quiet area. That's a very, very busy area in close proximity to the freeway. There are existing ambient noise levels that are far in excess of anything we would ever generate, particularly with the mitigation measures we've proposed and indicated we would actually do. The only thing I really take issue with respect to staff is that staff says it can't make the findings and it sticks by its previous recommendation. I would simply say to you that staff doesn't make the findings. The Planning Commission makes the findings, and you make the findings. And in making the findings, you make the findings based upon ponderable legal evidence of significance. The Planning Commission made the findings. I don't care really whether staff did or didn't. If you look at staff's report, it's hard to see how it could not have made the findings because its report confirms everything that we have said to you all the way through this process. The Planning Commission made the findings. I therefore think it should be not difficult for you, in turn, to make those findings because there's no evidence that would suggest there's any basis for not making the findings. I have the architect here, and I'd probably like to have him take you through the circulation patterns and show the site plan briefly so everyone understands the relationship between the properties.
Okay, good evening. My name is Muthan Ibrahim. I'm the architect for the project. Okay, I'll start with the site section A, B, and C. The first section, Section A is over here, basically is going through the proposed car wash. The Section B is going through the existing store, which is going to replace with 10 feet wall. The current store height is 14 feet, so the impact on the yard, right now the backyard of the neighbor is 14 feet tall building. Now this is going to be removed and replaced with a wall. The 10 feet will be that height over here, and it's covered by the vegetation. Section C, going through the proposed drive-through behind the store. This is Section A. What we did is we lowered the car wash tunnel to 14 feet. We reduced the height by 24 inches. This is the minimum we can accommodate the equipment inside the tunnel. You can see the canopy, existing canopy, in the lane, the tunnel, 10-foot setback to the property line. And this is the yard of the southwest neighbor. Basically, it's full with vegetation. This is a big tree over here. Basically, the whole thing is screened. This section is basically here. Right? This is a partial site plan, that's the tunnel. And this is the existing two retaining walls, property line. And this is the appellant property. So that section generally run through the southwest neighbor. Next would be the Section B, basically is going through the store. We have the proposed 10-foot wall. It used to be the existing store. Once we remove the existing store, this structure will be lowered by 4 feet. So the impact on the yard for the neighbor will be less by 4 feet. Plus, when we did the survey, our surveyor indicated that those trees, existing trees, which is very thick, create a screen, continuous screen. You cannot see the store, hardly see the store. There are some pictures that staff provided for us from the neighbors, and I think they took it from the living room here. It looks like, the trees are covering the entire. Anyway. So, and then the light, since this is a south property line, the general light direction will be here. So there's no impact really from the gas station structure into the yard. Next section would be C. This is going through the drive-through. Oops, sorry. See, okay, all right. So the section is going the drive-through here. Basically, those are the retaining walls, as you see here. This is the wall, the 10-foot wall, property line, and this is the yard of the neighbor behind. That's the house, existing house. And as you see, those existing three, according to our surveyor, they are approximately 28 feet tall. Okay, so the sites.
Sorry, that was loud.
Just need to
Continue?
just
Speed it up?
finish it up.
Okay, so we picked two large cars. One is Mercedes S-Class, and the other one is 8-passenger Yukon XL GMC. And we compare them to the parking stalls for the city of Lafayette. You see this, the one that we use in circulation is the GMC SUV. It's larger even the standard parking stall, city of Lafayette. Okay, the first, this is requested by the city council. This is the south fueling lane. The GMC is going through the drive-through. And then those are three Mercedes large size cars. There's a lot of, various size of cars goes to the gas station, but we use the larger size. And you can see there's plenty of space here. The next one, quick, the next one, this is a car heading east on Stanley, coming into the fueling lane, and then there is a car exiting. So you see the driveway and the guard post is here, plenty of space. Okay, this exhibit 3, basically a car coming in from Stanley and heading to the south fueling lane. Exhibit 4 is a car heading east on Stanley, west on Stanley, and going to the north fueling lane. This is the car coming on Stanley east and going to the drive-through. This is a car from the north fueling lane taking a left on Stanley. Okay, this actually addressed the staff concern regarding if you have a car in this direction going west, how it's going to go to the drive-through. Currently, the distance between the center line of the columns between the lanes is 30 feet. This is enough to allow 3 cars, two cars, one car on the fueling lane on this side and the other on this, and somebody can pass. Not a large car, not SUVs, but like, mid-size cars, they can make it.
Okay.
Big trucks, cannot make it,
Okay.
in between. But they can take a U-turn
I'm
into
going to cut you off right there because I've given you plenty of time.
Okay.
Okay. So, thank you very much for that. Are there questions for the speakers? Councilmember Geringer.
Yes, can you go back to Exhibit 4? So you have the car, so you have people at the fueling lanes, right? And then you have the car parked there to exit, is that correct? That's right in front of the entrance to the car wash?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so then go to Exhibit 5. And you don't have that car there anymore, but you have a car coming in to go into the entrance to the car wash. How does the car go? I mean, what happens in that scenario?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. Usually in gas station design, we look at all those circulation. Usually people, when they drive on a gas station lot, they're very careful. They're very respectful to each other. They give, everybody gives the others, if the person can pass in front of someone, they will let him pass. So I don't see it's a problem. I mean, if you fill the entire lot with cars, nobody can move, but that's not the reality.
Right, but what is happening here is that that car is trying to come in to go to the car wash, we're assuming, because you show that it can happen. That car is waiting to either go left or right onto Stanley, the car that you had in Exhibit 4. And then if they can't get through to the car wash, they're going to wait. Because as you said, they'll be polite and they're going to wait until they can get in to go to the car wash. Then what happens is that left turn off of Pleasant Hill Boulevard onto Stanley, that person not being able to get onto the property is going to cause a backup there. That was what I was asking staff about earlier. Had they studied these patterns, and I think the mayor asked as well, had those patterns been studied so that it takes into account that life doesn't just happen on the property, that it has impacts onto the surface streets. And I have watched cars and have been a car trying to go to the gas station because I had to go at that time or was going down that way, having to wait to get through that left turn lane there if cars have to wait. And it looks like this situation creates I'm just asking, it looks like in this particular situation it creates a queue outside of the property.
Maybe the traffic engineer can answer that for the outside traffic, but how many cars going to have this situation? Usually the car wash is for the gas station customers. People don't go to, I'm going to go and wash my car. They go put gas and then, let me go to the car wash. And they go to the car wash. This is not a full service car wash where, hey, on Sunday, I'm gonna go take my kid, take my laptop, and I'm gonna go wash my car. I spend 45 minutes. I do that. This is not that type of car. This car is fast service, 5 minutes. I go and put gas. I don't have time. I run through the tunnel and leave. You see what I'm saying? That's why I say I put this, nobody asked me to put this. I put that, okay, to give you everything. But I don't think that's going to be the majority, probably 1%. So I don't think, I'm not a traffic engineer. Well, the traffic engineer can answer this question, but I don't think that's going to affect the traffic on the street. I don't think it's going to be happening a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Vice Mayor Kendall.
Hi, yeah, thank you for your assessment. So just a quick challenge you on the people coming into car washes. I have an electric car, and the more of us have electric cars, we are going to drive in. So
Sure.
that percentage is probably higher than what you're thinking. Totally irrelevant. I just think about that.
Yeah,
that will get more and more.
You're right. If you drive a Tesla, you don't need to put gas. But how many Teslas on the road that gonna wash here?
Correct. Well, I have a Bolt. Yes, I have a little bit looser on it. So anyways, the 6,000 square feet of extra space, that was one of the arguments that Mr. Bowie made. I do see that there's, so the bulk of that, I imagine, is the extra space for the vacuums, right?
Okay, I can point it out for you here. Currently, there is a fence straight here.
Right.
So this triangular is not used. That's one. There is another triangular not used here. So if you add this area, I think we presented that to the Planning Commission. If you add these two, upper 5,000, 6,000.
And I think that's great, but
Yeah, it's not used.
the fact that it's offsetting to help any of the queuing, that's where I'm challenging you, because I don't see those spots being helpful in on-site circulation. I know they're parking spaces, but they're not going to add anything to the circulation.
Okay, I don't think there is difference between the current circulation and the proposed. I think it is, let's take a look at the site plan here.
Right.
So the canopy is existing. Those are the pumps, right? The people that comes this way, they're not gonna take a U-turn and go this way back. They're gonna have to go this way and exit. So people coming this way.
So
they
could I
go-
just suggest you show your first slide, which shows the existing conditions? Show your first slide. That's it. That was.
Existing condition. I don't think I have.
That's it.
Oh,
right,
this
just
one, yeah?
past it. That's there.
Okay.
So do you see all that space beyond the gas pumps?
Mm-hmm.
That's queuing space. That's existing conditions. You do not have that with your proposal. Your proposal does not add queuing space.
Okay.
Now, let me just explain one thing to you so you can answer the Vice Mayor's question. That's the issue that we're concerned about. You have enough room to demonstrate queuing can happen, turning can happen, but if there's several cars, and you saw a video from the appellant that indicated many cars can be there at once, forget the students running out between the cars, you don't have the room to have all those cars moving through that site at once. You've taken that away. You may have added 6,000 square feet, but it's not added in queuing space. Queuing space has been lost, and that makes the issue of access on and off the site that much more critical. Okay, that's just a clarification point. So back to the Vice Mayor's question.
No, thank you. That was delightful. You phrased that far better than I was able to explain it.
Okay.
And so I do agree that we have lost
Okay.
some queuing space.
Yeah, but look, a site like this designed 40 years ago, we're demolishing gas stations and rebuilding them. And the rules that we use is the same. And clients are happy and coming back to us doing the same thing. I believe, in my experience, this 30 feet will work because people will learn. And when they open, this probably car wash queuing will be very busy. Everybody wants to try it. But after a week, everything settled down. You won't see more than four cars.
So do we have the traffic engineer here to attest to what you're assuming will happen?
Okay. I don't know.
Oh, he is. Okay.
Where is-
I see somebody.
That would be great.
Yeah, thank you.
Because now we'll get to evidentiary.
So what specifically, I mean, there was a lot of points that we were covering.
Well, there's a lot going on here, but I think what I had asked early on was whether or not in this MND process, you took a look at the actual turning radiuses and circulation components that we now have as several exhibits in front of us. Many of those seem to have conflicts. Many of those seem to have the potential for backing up traffic on Stanley and even Pleasant Hill Road. But you have a statement in here that indicates there's not going to be any impact. The question I have for you is, did you have these different plans in front of you when you made that assessment?
So I did not have the turning templates at the time. I'm really just kind of looking at it from a general overview, and that's generally what we do during the CEQA process. We don't normally get into nearly that level of detail. So just looking at it in terms of how the site was laid out with the pumps where they are today, I didn't really see that this part of the project was going to make things worse, significantly worse, that would cause an impact.
So what we have right now is a great deal of room, I'd say 60 feet off of the pumps, that allow people to maneuver, queue, and work their way onto the street or off of the street, depending on ingress or egress. We're now reducing that to an adequate 30 feet. But that 30 feet, according to the different drawings we have, basically accommodates two-way traffic. There is no queuing space. In fact, if you stop on any one of those routes, you're going to be blocking someone from going someplace else. Yet, we have a video, the appellant put on the video for us, which showed clearly more than 3 or 4 cars moving through that area, which is now 60 feet wide, which will become 30 feet wide. So, is there a concern here that we need to look at?
I mean, it is possible that you will get enough queuing on site that you will back up onto Stanley.
Okay. Do you have any other information to provide us that would make us understand what the applicant is saying, which is that they've added more space and therefore there's no problem?
In that case, I mean, they've added more space for the queuing for the car wash, but I think you're right in terms of there's not going to be as much space in terms of queued vehicles. What I don't know is how many queued vehicles are there typically. And in normal cases, we don't design, if maybe that only happens during the 15 minutes that school gets out, we don't normally design for worst case scenarios. So in those cases, you might get 1 or 2 cycles at the signal at Stanley where maybe not everybody can get through. But it's really hard to judge and analyze what those impacts would be.
Okay, so what we have in the mitigated negative declaration is the last sentence under vehicles exiting onto Stanley Boulevard outside of the AM, school, and PM peak hours. Stanley Boulevard has minimal traffic. Well, of course, AM peak, PM peak, and school is what we're worried about. That's our issue. So if you exclude those things, obviously there's not a problem. But if you keep those in the mix and you assess them, there may be quite a bit of conflict and a potential for congestion on Stanley and backing up onto Pleasant Hill Road. Because Councilmember Geringer indicated she's experienced that already with people trying to get into the existing station where she can't make a left-hand turn heading south from Pleasant Hill Road onto Stanley. Is that something that you've assessed? Because it doesn't seem to be here.
I mean, it's generally the conclusion that it's not going to be much worse than it already is. Yes, it already exceeds those, so is adding a car wash really going to make things that much worse out there?
Well, if it takes away the queuing space that people are using so they don't have the backup, it could make it a lot worse. And it's not the car wash that's doing it. It's the loss of queuing space. Do you follow me?
Yes.
Okay. So we are a little concerned about this because it seems to be a potential impact that throws this whole assessment of impact by you, or the less significant impact in the MND, out the window and becomes something that needs to be somehow mitigated. So I'm just concerned that we have all the information we need to make a good decision. Do we have that information from where you're standing?
It's not really about the operational impacts normally. When we're talking about CEQA, it's more about the safety impacts. I'm not necessarily seeing that there is a significant safety impact for having additional queued vehicles there. There may be a little more congestion on the site. Maybe people will avoid it. I know I've pulled in that gas station before and it's completely full and I'll turn around and leave just because I can't get around the site. So adding the car wash, I don't think is really exasperating a safety deficiency out there.
But eliminating the queue space is the issue. The car wash eliminates the queue space.
I guess I'm still not understanding, I mean, it's not really making the safety issue any worse. And from an operational standpoint, just be a little more congested.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions for the speaker, Vice Mayor Kendall?
So in the lack of the large queuing space, did you analyze the largest vehicle? Because there was like the small motorhome. What do we have the largest size that can turn around on that whole end now? Because that's gone. They're going to have to back out. So do you have a maximum in mind, or the architect, either one? What's the longest vehicle, say
I have, I think, Exhibit 9, but I want to go back to the queuing space.
Can you answer mine first, and then we go back?
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
So let me see. So,
You've got one that has a trailer.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
so we got one that has pulling a 20-foot long boat trailer.
Okay.
So this is coming this way and exiting out, heading this way. Now, okay, so when this trailer and boat come to the gas station, people normally, nobody gonna go behind them because they're long,
Right.
they don't wanna wait. You know, people smart, they use the gas station every week. So they kind of navigate their way. This is not a Costco gas station that require queuing. You've seen the queuing in Costco. This is a neighborhood gas stations. Usually, that's what you get, basically. This property has a lot of space before, unused space. That's why you see the kids like all over the place. Now we put, a safe path of travel up to a ramp with handrails here, and a raised sidewalk 7 feet wide, and another, gentle ramp with handrails, and then 3 feet raised walk up to this point. Current site plan, people just wander through the 4 fueling lanes. I don't know how this is safe currently.
Well, that was the question I was asking our city attorney about the access by students jaywalking across the street. There's a problem there. And that's not going to change with this design. That remains the same. There's nothing here that says the students are going to do anything different.
Well, at least we'll identify a path of travel away from the cars for them.
Yeah, oh.
We have no evidence. Councilmember Geringer.
So two questions. Since you were talking about the crosswalk and the path, and so I understand that you're responsible for what's happening on the site, and putting the handrails and the raised walkways there is providing access to the retail space. And I guess my question is, thank you first for creating that planned safety, but where are customers coming from to get to that safe space onto your property? And it really comes back to the mayor's question to the attorney earlier, is that they have to come from somewhere to get onto your property, but where's the responsibility, since that path exits out to where there's no real, unless they're coming down the sidewalk from this way, or they're coming from the sidewalk at Pleasant Hill and Stanley across the traffic, the 2 entrances now, to come around to that. And so, I think it's just those safety concerns about getting on there, and so that would be my concern, and continuing to ask the mayor's question. And then, so the trailer comes through. Is there currently somebody saying which way I'm going to enter the gas station from? This shows everybody sort of facing the pumps and getting ready to go out that way. Or your egress
okay,
and all of that shows it coming that way.
Okay.
And back again to this personal experience, because I do drive by there and I use it. If I'm coming Pleasant Hill Boulevard, I do want, and I'm coming south on Pleasant Hill Boulevard, I am going to come in that way and go through. A lot of times what I find is that all the pumps are full coming the other way. And so then we have to back up and we have to do everything, or we do what I do, which is what you keep suggesting that people do on the natural. If I can, because I haven't waited too long to fill my car, I will wait and go home. But a lot of times I need to get in there, and so I'm going to pull over and wait. And so these pattern flows, I was just curious if it's thought that we all just operate on the same way and go in and out through that way. But is that part of a design, when
Okay,
you're designing
yeah, I
a gas
actually-
station as the architect?
Yeah, in the exhibits, because the concern was last time is this distance here, that's why most of them this way to prove that everything would work for us. And I just want to mention, there is a gas station, another Shell gas station on Mount Diablo Boulevard in Walnut Creek, 680 and 24 below the highway. I'm not sure, you guys went there over. I mean, I checked, yesterday I was there, I checked the distance between the guard post and the curb in the front, the store, it's 25 feet. I don't know how they approve it, and it's still working, nobody complaining. And then the other, from this side, from the guard post to the planter on Mount Diablo Boulevard is 21 foot. It's tight, but ours is 30 feet. That's why I'm confident this works. And I use it in many gas stations before. This is not the first gas station that I use this distance.
So which one were you exactly talking about? The one to get off?
It's 24 and 680. The gas station's kind of, below the highway on Mount Diablo.
On Mount Diablo. So
Yeah,
as you
and
enter,
then you can go 24 directly if you exit and you
Yes.
take left. Yeah, I mean, you've been through it. This is very tight. And then part of that 25 feet, they stripe 5 feet path of travel from the accessible parking stall to the store. That's part of the 25 feet. Car wash has nothing to do with the 30 feet.
So just,
Look, you'll get your chance. Please, quiet. Thank you. Councilmember Bliss.
so two quick questions. One, I just want to pick up on that because you offered that as an analogy with or without a car wash. I just wondered, how would you, if you could just, I mean, you know the site really well. I'm familiar with it because I drive Mount Diablo like many people here do, very frequently. How would you characterize some of the land uses immediately adjacent to that particular example that you just offered?
It's mostly offices and retail, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no high schools across the street,
No, no
just
high
to grab an example. Okay. And then the other question I have is, I want to try to reconcile something that kind of threw me about the comments offered by the applicant in terms of, so obviously when we talk about the circulation concerns that we've expressed about, with the proposed project, clearly there's an intersection between sort of the actual, drawings of how cars would flow through the site and what's possible in terms of turning radiuses or turning radii, and the volume of cars, right? That gets into the queuing space issue that the mayor raised. So clearly the number of cars that are, going through, the gas pumps and then accessing the car wash is important. The number of cars coming onto the site to use the car wash is important. Now, and I don't want to misstate what Mr. Bowie said, but what I heard him say was he was trying to assuage some concerns about the ways that cars would get from the pumps to the car wash. And he said, if I heard him correctly, that might be an overstated concern on our part because cars could very easily leave, get their gas, leave, and then come back. And when I heard you talk about the circulation, you actually said the opposite. You said that's actually really infrequent. Most people will get their gas, go right into the car wash. So there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between, if I could just finish my question, how prevalent it is for cars to either come onto the site and access the car wash directly as opposed to getting gas and then going to the car wash. So is there any data that you have or any sense that you could offer in terms of how frequent it is for either? Because this goes right to the question of how the volume of cars will interact with the design of the site. And yet we've heard in the applicant presentation two very different versions of the interaction between people using the pumps and people using the car wash. And I just want to know,
Okay.
so I'm just curious as to what the facts would be.
So when we designed the site, we designed the drive-through for the car wash normal than we should. Usually is 100 feet long enough for 5 stalls. For this site, we increase it to 8 cars. That we're not gonna get 8 cars, but we want to make sure that this is not gonna impact the traffic on site. Now, most customers, they go for the gas and then go to the car wash. But if they cannot go to the car wash, it's not a big deal for this type of car wash. Like I say, this is not the full service. This is, like quick wash. So they leave the site, they go somewhere else. And at that time, the gas station owner lost the business. And that's how it works.
So to come back to my question then, do you have a sense of from your experience in the industry, even roughly, what proportion of cars, in terms of I'm sure there's been some modeling that you've done around, if the fundamental premise of the whole application is that there'll be enough volume of people using the car wash to make what I understand from the application, from the letter from Mr. Bowie, would take what's currently a only marginally profitable business and turn it into a much more, sustainably profitable business. So there must be some sense in terms of the numbers of use. And so I just want to see if you can get any sense of what that additional volume looks like, but also the share of cars accessing the car wash directly as opposed to people coming on, using the gas pumps, and then going to the car wash. We're getting 2 different versions of how frequent those are.
I would estimate the car wash business here probably 40 wash, 50 wash a day.
40 or 50 a day?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not really much. There's
So
a lot of cars comes for gas.
If I may, and we have the traffic engineer here, the trip generation number that we have in the MND is 11 a.m. peak hour trips, 11 p.m. peak hour trips, and an average of 169 daily trips. I think that is for the car wash itself. Is that correct?
Yes, but I would add that was super conservative because there's no industry textbook that actually tells us the difference between a car wash or a gas station with a car wash and one without a car wash. So I was just trying to be conservative and taking a completely different use, which is a standalone car wash, not including a gas station, looking at that trip generation and kind of stretching it out to develop some type of trip generation to assume that there will be some new trips as a result of having a car wash at this local gas station.
Okay, so do we know how many average daily trips there are now at the gas station?
We know the AM and the PM peak hour numbers. I don't have them off the top of my head, but it's around 100. It was in my original. Would you like me to look it up? Or?
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful. So this trip generation number is really just for the car wash itself, if it was sitting there by itself?
Yes, that would be the net new trips. So that is
Net new trips, okay.
So we actually did data collection at this Shell station in an AM peak hour. And during the AM, which is 7:55 to 8:55 in the morning, it was a total of 68 people coming in and 69 going out. And then in the PM peak hour, we had 73 coming in and 71 going out.
Thank you. Okay, and then we would add another 11 on top of those 2 peak numbers.
Yes. Correct.
And the average daily trips of 169 is basically that sum of all of those. Is that correct?
It's assuming that it has a standard gas station profile, that our manuals that we use as standard industry references give us a 24-hour volume profile.
Yeah.
So not only do they give us the average, but based on the AM and the PM average volumes there, I had fit a bell curve to it basically, and that's how you generate. I think it was roughly 13% of the daily traffic occurs in the AM peak hour, and then when you broaden that out, that's where you get to the 168.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I jumped in.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. You helped elaborate on the question. That's all I had.
Okay, good.
Questions, yeah.
Other questions?
I do.
Vice Mayor Kendall.
So back to the noise specs. This is the part that I'm very interested in. And I do understand, and we had a conversation with staff and Rincon last week. And one of the things that you brought up that I didn't get answered was there's the negative mitigation from the 6 feet to the 10 feet wall for noise, but there's also these silencers. So do you have any manufacturing specs because we have the manufacturing specs for the dryers, that was included in the report. And I don't see anything about the silencers, who you're getting them from.
I don't have spec for it. The owner got it from the manufacturer rep, but we've used it in other gas station. We've used silencers in the past when we need to use it.
So is the applicant willing to do any of those options?
Oh, the silencer?
Or any of them, right? There was the doors, and there was the silencers,
Yeah.
and there was the wall.
Yeah. If I may, the mitigated negative declaration at table 12 indicated what the various options would do in terms of reducing noise.
But that wasn't based on the manufacturer spec, that was Rincon's simulation.
Rincon simulation and everything of that sort, which we
Correct.
believe to be more accurate than the manufacturer, because their model apparently takes into account topographic features and other features for the specific site. But table 12 indicates that mitigated noise level with silencers would have everything below, well, the highest be 40.8, and that's actually lower than the lowest standard that City of Lafayette requires. And everything else is actually below 40 in that particular table. And we did say to the Planning Commission that we would be happy to put silencers in place, and that was one of the conditions that we had. We also agreed to do a 10-foot sound wall, which the silencers would render unnecessary. So it was more, we're happy to do whatever is best from the neighbor's standpoint. If they want a 10-foot sound wall, we'll put it up. If they'd rather not have it, we don't need it. And we also decided we'd leave it up to the Design Review Commission, which was another condition of the Planning Commission approval, that we would go to design review with the Design Review Commission and look at that whole issue and decide what the best solution was for the wall.
Okay. So back to, so my reasons here is I did have some, if Rincon is here, a couple things that were noteworthy from our conversations was some limitations in their model. They have their infinite walls. They can't put in a ceiling, a roof into their model. And they admit that that's another reflective surface for noise.
Actually, I work with sound consultant on a lot of projects that required car wash next to the residential. And the construction of the car wash tunnel itself, it's a CMU, 8 inches CMU wall on the side, and the front are 12 inches thick. And those CMU cores are full with concrete. Now, the roof that we use is a minimum 8 inches reinforced slab concrete. And that's going to be observing, that mass going to absorb the sound. Now, the sound consultant, their model, they cannot
Right.
put my experience is if we can model the concrete sound, it will absorb some of the sound, and
Their model
Yeah.
assumed a refractive index of 1 on the walls.
I'm not a sound consultant, so
Well,
I can't speak to that.
So I'm
but
getting to
saying-
that. So they admit that they were having problems with that. I also asked them if they could run their simulation without the wall in between the neighbor, and they can confirm what, and you guys were listening to, and they said they couldn't. And so that would be, so basically trying to get them to get their model, and if they're here, if they can talk about it, to try to get their model to match what the manufacturing specs were. So basically reduce their model into something that would match what the manufacturer as a baseline, and then start adding, and then add your mitigations, and so we can walk across this thing, and they cannot. And so I find that as another deficiency with their issues. They admitted, and you guys were there listening to it, they're not engineers, and they don't certify their results. So there's no certification from this analysis that says that these numbers, or they're not going to prove that these numbers are valid. And so I have trouble with that. So I'm trying to go back to manufacturing specs, because that's the only thing that we have that is certified, that they'll stand by, that anybody will stand by. And so we would need to have those silencers manufacturing specs to go along with these things. I mean, so my problem is and I presented this to the city attorney as well, is what happens if this gets built, and I imagine the neighbors are gonna measure it, and if it's above 50 dB, what do, right? And so how do you see that? Because this model isn't validated. So the only numbers they have are from the manufacturer. And that's the only recourse as a landowner you're gonna have, unfortunately.
If the project get approved, you can put a condition that we will do a test after you build it. And part of our team will have another sound consultant engineer, part of our team, that make sure that when we build it, everything comply with the conditions of approval.
No, and I totally agree with that, but unfortunately, if you don't, we put these conditions on, then we end up having to shut you down. And that's heartbreaking, right? That's tough. And so I'm just wondering if we could get, some better validation of these numbers that we're gonna approve. We have to approve this or deny this based on what's presented to us, right? And so if there's so many deficiencies in this model,
Okay.
how do we get there?
I had, briefly, our sound consultant, this is way back, looked at the report and stuff like that. And I do a lot of work with him and stuff. With putting the car wash tunnel 10 feet away from the property is very easy to accommodate those numbers. We can guarantee that.
But I'm not seeing the proof here. I think that's nice, but that's not in the documents that I have in front of me. And that's,
I have to say that the process that we've been involved in is a process that the city developed, and the city called for its consultants to make determinations. We paid for all of the consultants' work. The consultants came out with modeling and studies, and they reached certain conclusions, and they published their conclusions. On their conclusions, we appear to have fully mitigated everything with only silencers, and we're proposing to add a 10-foot sound wall in addition to that. We have to rely upon the information the city in this instance went ahead and produced, because it was a process that said we shouldn't produce it, we might be biased in some fashion, it's up to the city to produce it. So we've relied upon the city's engineers' findings, and this is the first I've heard that there's any question about this, the modeling and the findings, they've indicated clearly are well below city standards for noise.
the Planning Commission brought this up as well, the lack of the roof. So I know that's not the first time you've heard this, so I'm just saying that came up even in their meetings, that their model is not, it doesn't get certified. They both brought that up.
Okay, can we ask the sound consultant here if the actual building will have 8-inch concrete roof, what is the model going to be, better or worse?
If they're here, yeah.
Evening, Council. Carrie Zajac with Rincon Consultants. And so your question is, what would the model results be if we put the roof on top of the model?
Yes.
On top of the car wash? That's something that is difficult to determine without having modeled that, just because of the properties of noise, the different properties of the site.
But with a refractive index like you did for the walls, they weren't.
Right now with the walls, because we have infinite high walls, you have the sound coming out on both sides, coming on both sides like this of the car wash. When we put a roof on that car wash, that's essentially condensing the sound down, so it's still just coming out the two ends like this. So because of the properties of the site, it's hard to say if the noise would increase or decrease if we put a roof on top. But as you know, we are limited by the model of what we can and cannot do for the roof.
And it is true that you don't certify the analysis either. Like if it comes in higher than this, the applicant can't go to you and say, oh, you messed it up, right?
Well, our mitigation does have a standard of performance that we're expecting, that the mitigation will reduce the noise by a certain level in order to achieve the standards. With any environmental document that has mitigation, there's a mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and that's how the city lays out a plan to enforce the mitigation. So there are monitoring and enforcement mechanisms.
Oh, absolutely, and we will put the condition of approval based on that. But how does that help me to know how close or how far away? So the manufacturing spec came in between 66 and 62 dB and 90 degrees out the front of a car wash. That's what they guarantee, and that's at 20 feet, which is where the resident is. And so, an average of that is 64. And you're saying with a 10-foot wall, we'll get it down to under 50, just barely under 50. And you know the sound it's log scale, and so a difference of 14 it's 14 times louder. It's a big deal. It's not just 25% louder. It's 14 times louder, and so the difference between a 6-foot fence and a 10-foot fence only gave you 1 dB, just to make it relative, so you understand the difference. So 6-foot to a 10-foot fence only changed it by 1 dB, and you're claiming that the model reduces it by another factor of 13, and I just want to see the evidence, and I don't know where. It's not really in here. And because of the model deficiencies, I don't know how to get that certified. I don't know how to do that based on what's in front of me here. And I don't know, I would love some help on that.
I think you could see from that topography map that there is a drop in topography. So with the 6-foot sound wall, which was proposed in the site plan, so that's what we analyzed originally, was a 6-foot sound wall, plus the topography drop, plus the normal attenuation of noise over a distance, that's where we saw a big difference. I think it is typical for a sound wall to reduce noise by 10 decibels, but what our analysis showed is that going from 6 decibels to 6 foot to 10 foot doesn't have a very big difference, because the 6-foot sound wall itself plus the topography difference is what's really.
And so you really can't show me one without the 6-foot fence, because that's the proof that I don't have, right?
We didn't build our model that way. I mean,
Right.
we could do that, but we didn't have time in the last few days, to redo all our
Right.
modeling. But I mean, that is an option. But because the site plan as proposed, we modeled the site plan as proposed, and that had the 6-foot sound wall as part of the project. So that's why we built the model including the sound wall. 6-foot sound wall.
Okay, other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Could I just respond to one thing that was just stated by the consultant?
Sure, go ahead.
She's indicated that the sound wall would reduce sound by up to 10 decibels. She's indicated the difference between 6 feet and 10 feet wasn't that great. In the table I referenced in the mitigated negative declaration, which is table 12, the footnote indicates that silencers can reduce noise by up to 10 decibels. So even with their modeling, they've indicated that it's way below normal sound levels. But if you take that statement, which they've footnoted in there as a conclusion, and you add to that the conclusion regarding the effect of sound walls, you really have a difference of about 20 decibels from manufacturer specifications. So I would think that we can rely upon the report that they've already done. And I would say that we've had no influence whatsoever on this. We have never spoken to the consultants because we were told we should not.
That's good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we will now open the public hearing, and folks will have 3 minutes to speak unless they have time ceded to them, and they can have one person cede to them 3 minutes, which means the maximum you can get is 6 minutes. So don't line up 50 people to cede you time. It doesn't do you any good. Okay, so Stephen Slosek and Christine Slosek, are you here? Oh, that's good. So Stephen Slosek, you have 6 minutes.
Steve Slosik, 1167 Nogales Street. Put this up here. I'm going to have to totally reconfigure what I was going to say based on what's been said here. I've lived in Lafayette for 16 years. I am an architect also, so I want to point out a couple things. One, I'm unclear about the 30 feet that was described in that drive aisle between. I measured off the drawing far less than that. In fact, I measured it being less than 3 parking spaces at 8'6" clear. Now maybe 30 foot is center to center, but I don't believe it's the clear dimension, but I could be corrected if that's not correct. But my calculation was the space between 2 parked cars at the fuel pumps was less than 1 parking space in width if you allowed 8'6" at each side. And I would also keep in mind that doors are being opened and closed all the time. The second thing, I'm confused about the 24-hour operation, they said. I brought this up last time. Last time we met, I heard that someone said there was no interest in creating a 24-hour operation, and now I hear actually it's already open 24 hours. That's very confusing that they wouldn't have known that last time. And I will say that the posted hours on the building, and this is also validated by one of the employees, is 5 to 10 o'clock Monday through Friday and 6 to 10 Saturday and Sunday. So I'm just confused on that. I want to point out another thing, just with respect to the PNC district. The one thing that is stated there is that the minimum size allowed for any new parcel created in that district would be 40,000 square feet. I think the parcel that's existing right now that we're talking about is a little over 26,000. So clearly, I think a lot of the challenges that you're seeing are a direct result of this being below the standard that was set when the PNC was created for any new parcel. Anyways, noise is really my main concern after saying all that. And I bought a little sample here, but just for reference, that's about 65 decibels, I believe. That's about 68. That's about 83. And so, 80, and I'm not sure about the silencer. I thought the quiet kit that was presented included the silencer. Maybe that's incorrect, so anyways, if it was, it's more than 80 decibels kind of at the source. That is what you might be hearing from that same 80 decibel. That there is, I believe, I'd have to test it with my meter, but is less than 50 decibels. We tested it earlier. I could be wrong and happy to demonstrate afterwards. But so less than 50 decibels is the standard that was set, I think, as far as breaking the law. But I don't know that we're necessarily just talking about breaking the law. You can't break the law anyways. We're talking about this specific use and what that specific use is going to have on the neighborhood. And I think sound levels less than 50 decibels, if they're occurring repeatedly off and on and off and on every day of the week from 7 in the morning until 8 in the evening, is a nuisance. And may not be illegal, but it's a nuisance. And I think, and we might find that, again, I'm trying to sit in my backyard, I'm having a cup of coffee at 7 in the morning, that's less than 50 decibels. I've read through Mr. Bowie's letter in the updated report, and he states the council's decision should be based on substantial evidence, and I think that's true, but I want to make sure it works both ways. Evidence on their side, for and against. Another thing I was confused by is he said, quoting here, "For good or ill, the council has already made the legislative determination that the gas station, including the car wash and retail space, must be permitted uses at this location regardless of the surrounding residential neighborhood." I'm surprised that would be the case, and I don't see that. I'm not a lawyer, but looking at the Lafayette Municipal Code, it talks about specific findings necessary for a land use permit. And it says it may be granted only after a public hearing and determination that the particular use sought is appropriate to the specific location. In other words, it's not approved at all. You need to find that use is appropriate, not back when the PNC district was created, but now, because that is a conditional use. There's 7 standards that need to be met for the finding. I'm going to talk about 3 of them. will not adversely affect the preservation of property values. I haven't seen any evidence of that. It is consistent with the general plan, and it will not create a nuisance within the neighborhood. If those standards aren't all met, as far as I understand, then you cannot find that this is an appropriate use and grant the permit. As far as the general plan goes, in the introductory chapter, number 1 in guiding principles is to preserve and enhance the character of Lafayette as a semi-rural community. And under the main themes of the plan, again, number 1, it says this plan recognizes the charm and value of Lafayette as a quiet, semi-rural town in an otherwise largely urbanized county.
So I need you to wrap it up.
Okay. Well, I will say that I've found numerous studies that talk about noise and the impact of traffic and airports on property values. And all of those conclude there is a direct correlation between property noise levels and a decrease in property value.
Thank you, Ms. Slozak. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. Liz Kaiser, followed by Darcy Cole.
Good evening. My name is Liz Kieser.
Kaiser.
No
I knew it, I got it.
Everyone gets it wrong.
That's all right. Okay.
We live at 5 Lark Creek Lane, and we also own 7 Lark Creek Lane in Lafayette. Please do not approve the car wash and convenience store at the Shell gas station. As mentioned just prior, this project is grossly inconsistent with the general plan. Excuse me. First, it does not protect the character and patterns of development of residential neighborhoods, which is goal LU1, the very first goal listed in the plan. The general plan requires that development allowed under current zoning along the Deer Hill Road corridor must be consistent with Lafayette's semi-rural community identity, page I-22. A car wash next to a home is not semi-rural. Additionally, this project does not protect the single-family residential neighborhoods north of Highway 24 from commercial and multifamily development, which is goal LU14. In addition to being way off from the general plan, there will be an increase in traffic congestion due to poor site circulation, which will result in higher risk to residents. With the Lafayette fire of October 27th and more PG&E power shutoffs coming this week, we all know that fire risk in this area is extremely high and needs to be considered as a top factor when making decisions that could impact egress. The SF Chronicle asked in an April article about La Marinda, quote, "Is their community prepared for a monster fire? Could they outrun flames that descended on their neighborhood?" This is a chilling question. The Moraga-Orinda Fire Chief, Dave Winokur, said in this article, "We know the road facilities can't support an evacuation. Just watch the traffic each morning." The Williams and so many others have pointed out the ridiculous and stressful traffic at this intersection and up Pleasant Hill Road. If the morning traffic of a particular road or intersection is an indicator of a bad evacuation route, according to this local fire chief, then what does that mean when it's our only evacuation route? Lafayette's fire evacuation plan has specific plans for zones around the city. Zones 4 through 7 all instruct residents to go to Pleasant Hill Road and then to an evacuation site, which could be Akalani's, Stanley, or the Lafayette Res. To get to any of these, you must pass through or near the intersection of Pleasant Hill and Stanley. So you can imagine the gridlock and resulting panic if there was a major fire and the traffic had to flow south from these 4 zones. The intersection would be overcome and cars would be at a standstill, and the lives of Lafayette residents, and particularly children, would be at great risk. The applicant has told you that the lot circulation can handle the number of cars and that customers' vehicles will not block traffic on either Pleasant Hill or Stanley. But this is a best case scenario. We do not live in a best case world. Please do not add to the congestion of a critical artery. Last month, the city of Campbell denied the proposed location of an In-N-Out Burger because it would exacerbate an already bad congestion problem. The intersection in question was given a D- score. As you know, Pleasant Hill Road and Stanley have already received an F rating. With this decision in Campbell, there is a local precedent that traffic congestion can be the deciding factor in determining land use. Please continue to protect Lafayette by denying this permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker, Vice Mayor Kendall?
I do. So you referred to MOFG Fire Chief Whitaker has a letter or comment. Where did you see that?
It's in the SF Chronicle. It was an article posted in April of this year where he was interviewed about fire safety in his district, but it did reference Lafayette in that article.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Darcy Cole, followed by Brian Bates.
Thank you all for being here to listen to our appeal. My name is Darcy Cole. I live at 1175 Pleasant Hill Circle. I've lived here about 24 years now. It's 2 doors down from the proposed site. My bedroom is upstairs, and I'm guessing that a sound wall wouldn't help out in my situation. I'm asking that I would like to request that you deny a land use permit for a car wash based on the fact that it will create a noise nuisance. The noise studies presented here are a best case scenario. I would like to see a worst case scenario because I've heard that there might be a change of ownership down the line if a car wash is approved. And if that is, I don't know if it's true or not, but if that's the case, is that new owner then going to be held responsible for keeping and maintaining the noise levels to what if we did approve them now, who's going to monitor that in the future? Last meeting, the car wash salesman representative, he mentioned that the car wash on Mount Diablo Boulevard was louder than most because it wasn't well maintained. Well, who's to say that this car wash wouldn't be well maintained if maybe there was a new owner? So that's a huge concern to me because I don't know who's going to be responsible for. I don't know how long a silencer lasts. I don't know how long, who's to say that. Anyway, what I'm saying is this is best case scenario. What's worst case scenario for us? Let's see, a couple of meetings ago, I also mentioned that cities are banning leaf blowers for their noise nuisance, and having a car wash in our backyard would be like having leaf blowers every day. If you've ever been in your backyard and you've wished that the noise would go away, then I think you can empathize with how we might feel being in the backyard of a car wash. The second reason I'm requesting a denial of the car wash land use permit is based on it being detrimental to the health, safety, and general welfare of Lafayette citizens. I do not see how we can knowingly make our grade F intersection more dangerous by adding more noise and more congestion. As I mentioned before, cities have been held liable for injuries when there have been known dangers at an intersection and nothing has been done to improve the safety of the intersection. Approving this permit would not just be not improving known dangerous, but actively making it more dangerous. Thank you. Any
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
Question for the speaker?
Okay.
Thank you very much. And Brian Bates, followed by Linda Rybel.
My name is Brian Bates. I live at 3152 Stanley. We've owned our house there since 1985, for about 34 years. In that time, we've seen the neighborhood continuously improve as a children-friendly environment. For example, the neighbors banded together many, many years ago to get stop signs installed along Stanley to improve pedestrian safety. And also later, the neighbors taxed themselves and worked with the city to install sidewalks so the kids could get to school, walk to school more safely. Soon after we first moved there, a local school was demolished on Quant Road. I think that was due to declining student enrollments in the 80s. But since then, we now seem to see children everywhere. They seem to be coming out of the woodwork. We've all seen the value of local homes increase as recent younger people have upgraded and improved the properties. Because of these changes, the character and aesthetics of the neighborhood has made for a quality and improved experience. No more cars parked on lawns, nicer landscaping. Hate to see this momentum changed by an industrial car wash. All this improvement has been kind of trying to buck counter forces. Some of these forces have been resulted from regional growth and additional traffic. Others have been changes in land use. For example, there was a big fight years ago to, well, let me stick with my notes here. I'll get off base too much. There's been a big increase of traffic, I think because Pleasant Hill Road some time ago was declared a highway of regional importance. But certainly in the time I've lived there, there's just been way more cars. I think also, I don't know what it's called. There's smartphone apps such as, I think they're called WAZ, has rerouted cars through the neighborhood. So a week or so ago, I don't usually go out at 6 o'clock at night. I've been retired for about 5 years, so I miss a lot of the commuter traffic. But I was shocked on how many cars were between Camino Diablo, this is going westbound, and Pleasant Hill Road, where the gas station is. And most of them were coming along Camino Diablo, and I think it was a bypass for some event that happened up on the freeway. So there's just a lot of traffic there and distraction. There's a lot of added distraction. I just remembered it. Alkalani's put in this reflecting sign that flashes, and I think it's a real safety hazard.
I need you to wrap up, Mr. Bates.
That's about it. I'll skip over one item. I think I just oppose this car wash. I think it'll detract from the aesthetics of the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you, sir. Linda Rybel, followed by Ethan Goddard.
Hello, I'm Linda Riebel. I live about 2 miles from the current gas station. I'm a patron there. I appreciate it. I'm glad it's there. I see we have 2 employees here tonight. But I do find some problems with the concept of expanding the business. Noise has been mentioned as a kind of nuisance. I would worry for the neighbors closer about chronic noise. As someone with severe hearing loss caused by a genetic condition, nobody's fault, but I would request that somebody study the effect on people nearby of chronic noise. Secondly, the issue of traffic at this intersection has been addressed in detail for many years, and the issue of evacuation in terms of wildfire, which has become a more recent issue. We're having another power outage this week, and our first speaker tonight ably addressed that issue. So I will trust your knowledge of this issue, of how important it is that we not additionally clog this intersection. I realized I could think of one reason to approve this project. If, therefore, 315 apartments is permanently and forever banned. Maybe we could have one or the other, but not both. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any question for the speaker? No? Okay. Ethan Goddard, followed by Julie Fox.
Hello, I'm a freshman student at Akalani's High School, and I know firsthand how much of a struggle it is to get out of the main parking lot every afternoon, and it takes an extremely long amount of time just to get out of the main parking lot. And I can only imagine how much more traffic will be caused by the car wash. It causes a large inconvenience for all the students trying to exit, and I can imagine the safety hazards that it will cause. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Julie Fox, followed by Anna Bates.
Good evening. I'm the mother of the freshman student who just spoke, and also a former resident on Pleasant Hill Circle, and lived very close to this facility. I guess my biggest thing after looking at every exhibit this evening, all the statistics, clearly the opposition, I have to ask, is this a true need in our community versus a want? And to me, it benefits one person, benefits the property owner, at this time. I'd love to think we live in a world where people are pull into a gas station in one direction and we're all kind and wait our turn and are pleasant. That's not always the case in day-to-day life. So I'd love to think that all of these things would be applicable, but in real life, and when you have a large high school across the street, and you have a community pool, by at large, a lot of members of Lafayette or residents from all over Lafayette go to Springbrook, this, I just can't see how it's a good decision. There is a major off-ramp, as we all know, to exit 24, which is already congested enough, which many people have said this evening. So as a resident, member of the community, and primarily concerned for these kids, because it is already very crowded, very dangerous conditions as it is, I don't see how this could help. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anna Bates, followed by Eric Harvey.
Hello, my name is Anna Bates, and I live on Stanley Boulevard, and have lived there for 34 years, and I oppose the project, the expansion of the gas station. I used to pull into a Shell station in Albany where I worked, and there was a car wash. And I found that the car wash, people are not that patient. And for me, just maneuvering around parking spaces and moving in and out of, an existing gasoline station, I tend to be a little more cautious. I tend not to want to squeeze around. And I found that, I could just see if, getting into a problem where you've got cars behind you, you've got cars in front of you. The Shell station car wash that I had attended there, it was dirty and messy, and yet it was not in a residential area, and so I was thinking of San Pablo Boulevard, and I'm thinking the majority of this site is really not on Pleasant Hill Road, whether the address is Pleasant Hill Road or not. It's really on Stanley Boulevard, and that is a residential area. So you're dealing with a residential area. I didn't see any of these, any sites of car washes and Shell stations that were in a neighborhood like ours. And so we want to improve our neighborhood. Maybe this was considered, 40 or 50 years ago, maybe a less Tony neighborhood, but we're changing it. And please consider that this is not going to improve our neighborhood, and it doesn't really serve any real need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Eric Harvey, followed by Jennifer Gonzalez.
Good evening, Mayor Anderson and Vice Mayor Cantrell. Thank you for letting me speak this evening. I'm here on behalf of my mother, Patricia Harvey. She lives next to the residence that the gentleman, the Williams, have presented. Her name is Patricia Harvey, and she, now going on this upcoming year, will have been here for 50 years. She has severe dementia, and it's a very misunderstood disease in that dementia itself is the inability to form a memory. It's different from Alzheimer's, where Alzheimer's, you maintain your memory from the past, but present situations no longer form cognitive value whatsoever. Because of that, her life is largely limited to being within the residence or the property that she owns, which is her backyard. That is her world. To go out shopping or do any other outside activities, she has to be accompanied by one of her children, myself, my brother, or my sisters. My main concern here is obviously for the safety of the area of the children, being a school zone. As an example, it took me, when I came over to caretake my mother starting 2.5 weeks ago. It took me just shy of 20 minutes to get from Highway 24 to the first right-hand turn, and that's prior to the intersection of Pleasant Hill Road and Stanley Boulevard. And that's just there. I am very curious as to why all the diagrams we've shown for flow show no vehicles on the actual roads. We see the vehicles parked, and only 3 of them at a time in the gas station. I don't think I've ever been by there or gone in there when there have been only 3 vehicles. And I know how hard it is to get in and out of that gas station. So I saw the one car that blocked the entrance to the car wash itself, and that would present a problem because that car cannot get out because of the traffic being blocked on Stanley Boulevard. And that's just going to create more of a backflow, more of a static situation rather than an ongoing flow, which the models as they presented it do not address. My second concern is, again, the sound. We have obviously increased road noise from 50 years ago when we first moved there, from Highway 24, as well as Pleasant Hill Road.
I need you to wrap up.
Okay. I asked it to be seated at the time for my mother, Patricia Harvey, which I also...
Well, she has to be present to cede your time.
Okay.
Unless somebody
Okay, my concern there, again, in terms of sound mitigation, the wall is an idea. I noticed no study or mention being made of the reflected or refracted sounds from the construction of a wall back to the residences, of which my mother's house backs onto the property of the proposed site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you very much. Jennifer Gonzalez. Okay. Hunter, why don't you wait because I don't have you up next. Lauren Deal, followed by Josh Smith.
Hi, my name is Lauren Deal. I live at 1269 Delaware Court. The last meeting I stood before you as a lifetime Lafayette resident with an emotional plea that our community would stand together against this plan. I realized at the time and the hours after that I stayed up thinking about this that we weren't going to win this by pulling on your heartstrings. I also hope that this is not going to be won by fear of litigation by the other side. Last meeting, a Fremont realtor was brought up and stated that many residents that live near a car wash, quote, enjoy it. As a resident, I found it humorous. As a Lafayette realtor, I find it simply wrong. My colleagues and I pulled numbers, and while we know the strength of the current market in our area, that doesn't mean that we're immune to the influences such as noise and zoning. From October of 2018 to September of 2019, the average Lafayette detached home price per square foot was $694. When we searched homes that had noteworthy noise issues, such as commercial nuisance or freeway noise, we found that multiple noteworthy homes fit this criteria and that these homes suffered sale price per square foot up to $200 less per square foot. The architect referred to this as a neighborhood gas station. I would emphasize the neighborhood aspect of this. Can you imagine what a buzzer at 3 a.m. does to people's home value? When I think about this as a mother in the community, I think about lessons that my children have learned in preschool. First and foremost, I would say it's a lesson on shapes. It would appear to me you're attempting to force a square peg through a round hole. I failed to see the positives in this plan for anyone besides the gas station owner, and there are innumerable issues that have been covered. It simply does not fit the space and the circumstances. As another woman stated, I explained it to my 3-year-old. Secondly, that there is a difference between a want and a need. She wants this car wash, I understand that, but there is not a need for this car wash for the community, and what it comes out at is an expense to others. Thirdly, I understand that this decision was made in 2016 to rezone. A lesson that I hope we all have learned is that when you make a mistake, you can always go back and fix it. You don't just keep going. You stop, you adjust, and you correct your mistake. Please do not knowingly make another mistake and approve this gas station at the expense of everyone in the community.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for the speaker? Josh Smith. followed by Nancy Speller. I can't quite read the last name, but.
Good evening. I want to thank you guys again for your time. I'm a resident. As I explained last time, we're on 1648 Springbrook, about 20 houses up from the high school, and I was telling you how we opened the doors for the football games. I'll mention it because it's fresh on my mind. The Akalani's water polo team played this weekend, and the noise was louder. And I just started thinking, why was it louder? And I have a feeling it's because of the concrete. I'm not I don't understand sounds all that well, but I think there's something dampening from the grass. So I think this sound will carry up Akalani's Valley. First of all, it's an urban area. I just don't think the footprint is set up for in this conditional use to add to the congestion of the already F-rated intersection. I fear for the developmental lungs of the young kids with the cars in the queue. Right now, you pull up to your gas pump, you turn your car off, you fuel. This new setup will be along the homes. It could be a bunch of cars running. I know when I go to the gas station on Mount Diablo to get a car wash, I'm so anxious that I'll get to the line and put in a credit card and it won't take it, maybe it won't read it, that I'll hold up everyone behind me. So I always double park, run into the gas station, get my receipt, go back to my car, and I'm just adding to the flow issues. As I come up and down our street each day 4 to 6 times, I notice the food delivery trucks and how large they are. The propane delivery trucks that'll add to the confusion and the backup here. And beyond that, I was asked to read by Stella Witherspoon a letter that she'd written. I don't know if I'd be able to read that. She's in a meeting. She's
actually here.
She's here. Okay. So I will not read this, and I'll let her speak for herself. But I would ask that this isn't approved on a conditional basis. I don't think it adds to the character of Lafayette the way the urban park that we talked about last meeting adds to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Nancy Spelter. I'm not quite sure on the spelling. Does that ring a bell for anyone? Nancy?
Spittler.
Spittler? Okay. Very good. Eric Harvey. Do I have 2 of those? All right. Stella Witherspoon. Okay, someone will read my statement on my behalf.
But she's here.
But she's here. Even better. Your time is up. Goodbye. I'm just playing with you. Trying to get a laugh.
Timing.
Okay.
Thank you. Greetings, Council. I'm a City Transportation and Circulation Commissioner, and I was attending our own commission meeting downstairs, but fortunately I'm here. But I am speaking to you tonight, right now, as a private citizen. I live on Stanley Boulevard, and I oppose the addition of a car wash facility and 24-hour convenience store. The parcel lot size is about 100 feet by 200 feet. It's too small to add a car wash and expand the store. Staff write in their November 18th report in Section A, quote, "During times of high use, motorists at the southern pumps facing west may need to exit the site via the westernmost driveway on Stanley Boulevard and re-enter at the easternmost driveway to access the queuing lane to enter the car wash. This is not acceptable. I challenge you to identify another commercial parcel in the city where circulation between services within the site must be achieved by the use of the city right-of-way. If a parcel is too small or poorly configured and does not allow customers to access all features from within the lot, the land use is not viable and should not be permitted. Granting this land use permit will clog Stanley Boulevard, increase traffic volume, and create vehicular conflicts that will degrade the already poor functioning Pleasant Hill Boulevard, Stanley Boulevard intersection. I disagree that in the July 15 Planning Commission condition of approval installing signage stating that the westernmost driveway on Stanley Boulevard is to be right in, right out only, will actually mitigate the circulation problems the car wash and convenience store will create. That particular driveway is a very problematic part of the current gas station. The driveway is one car length away from the intersection. Customers often do not signal that they are turning right into the station. This is dangerous for cars traveling east along Stanley Boulevard. The Planning Commission noted that customers exiting the driveway by turning left create hazardous conditions for all 4 lanes on Stanley Boulevard. These customers often block several lanes, as most want to use the right turn only lane to get back to northbound Pleasant Hill Road. So why don't these customers exit the driveway that's on Pleasant Hill Road? Well, one reason is because the on-site circulation is not sufficient, even at the present time. The Planning Commission narrowly considered only the problem of the westernmost driveway egress and neglected to consider the subsequent result of the condition of approval. Customers who obey the sign will be on Stanley Boulevard heading east, exactly the opposite direction that they want to go. There's no intersection until about 1,600 feet until Camino Diablo and Stanley Boulevard. May I continue just for another few sentences?
I need you to wrap up.
That intersection is controlled by a 3-way stop sign, but it's not safe to execute a U-turn at this location because it is very tight and has a high traffic volume. There are no other viable or legal options for turning around before that intersection, but customers will probably use Akalani's High School exit only driveway, the overflow parking lot by Springbrook Pool, the Happy Days Child Care parking lot, the Living Hope Church parking lot. Who knows? But none of them are acceptable.
Okay, thank you. We'll need to stop you there.
Thank
Any
you.
questions for the speaker?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, before you go, you mentioned access, I think, off of Pleasant Hill Road onto the site as not being acceptable. I got a little confused there. Could you go back to what you stated about the access, the driveway off of Pleasant Hill Road as an access? I think that's what you were referring to.
So initially, the first item where I'm concerned about customers who are going to the site having to use Stanley Boulevard to
Correct.
get to another feature of the site by using, obviously, the public right-of-way. I just don't feel that that's an appropriate use.
Understood. And I think you mentioned an access point. I assumed it was Pleasant Hill Road going onto the site, but there wasn't enough room for that to work. But I may have missed.
Okay. Well, I think the concern maybe is where if a car is leaving the site at the westernmost driveway on
Yes.
Stanley Boulevard, and
Okay.
they want to turn left.
Okay.
It's because
Gotcha.
they want to continue on Pleasant Hill Boulevard.
Right.
Going north. My thought was, well, why don't they just use the great big driveway that's on Pleasant Hill Boulevard already?
Yes.
And I think some of the problem is that they cannot navigate to that.
To get to it.
To be able
Okay.
to make a very easy right turn and progress where they're going.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mike Stern, followed by Janet Thomas.
Good evening.
Evening.
I'm Mike Stern, 3224 Palomares Avenue. So I wanted to recall some of the zoning history of this parcel in order to challenge a statement that was made in regards to the car wash. The applicant claims that this property was zoned for this use and is within the applicant's rights to build this car wash. This statement simply is not true. This parcel is zoned PHC, Pleasant Hill Commercial. In 2016, the zoning was created specifically for this and one other parcel in order to limit rights development, not to protect them. This limitation was put in place because of the parcel's location in one of Lafayette's residential neighborhoods. If the intention of the zoning was to protect the owner's right to develop, it would have been rezoned C1 commercial, like the other businesses in Lafayette south of the 24 freeway. In the October 15 staff report, it was stated previous to 2016 rezoning, there were 2 requests on file that show the application and denial for the C1 zoning of this parcel. The reason the applications were denied was due to potential neighborhood impacts of expanded use. The PHC Zoning Ordinance 650 lists the following as limited uses for this parcel: a gas station, park and ride lot, or single-story office. These are the designated uses that this parcel is zoned for, and I don't believe that anyone in this room would take issue with those uses. So again, to say this property was zoned for this use and is within the applicant's rights to build this car wash is not true. Since the PHC land use was designated, the applicant has been hard at work making efforts to expand the uses, and until recently, most of this activity was happening quietly while residents were unaware. On August 15, 2016, the applicant petitioned the City Planning Commission to add a car wash to a list of uses in the zoning. The business was represented in this hearing, but no residents spoke on the matter. The Planning Commission voted to add this use as a consideration with the requirement of a land use permit. Now we are at the stage where this land use permit is the only thing standing in the way of this development moving forward. The big difference between the hearings that were held for the zoning changes and the hearings that we're having now for the land use permit is that the residents are now aware. There's a more accurate assessment of what this development means to us and to our town. The most recent PHC Ordinance 652 clearly states the intention of the zoning as follows. The purpose of this article is to provide a limited number of uses that primarily serve residents and motorists in the northeastern section of Lafayette. These residents and motorists that the zoning ordinance is referring to are here in this room right now. And we're here at the last hearing, and we've been sending in emails. And I think it's pretty clear at this point that a car wash and a 24-hour convenience store on this parcel is not a use that serves us. In fact, it is a use that endangers us. So I hope tonight the council will uphold the true spirit of the PHC zoning to limit the uses of this parcel to those that are mutually beneficial to the business and to the residents and motorists of the northeastern section of Lafayette. Please vote to deny this land use permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Janet Thomas, followed by Hunter Davis.
Good evening. I'm Janet Thomas, 3206 Palomares Avenue. I live about 4 blocks south of the proposed car wash. And this is my neighborhood gas station, and I see some of the employees here have always been wonderful to me. But I do feel that expansion to a car wash, expansion of the retail space does not meet a community need. I'm concerned for some of my neighbors who are closer to the car wash, but my main concern is as a retired teacher at Acalanes High School. I've lived in the neighborhood for 35 years. I was a Springbrook pool member, but most importantly, a teacher of Acalanes. I'm very well aware of the behavior of the students who look forward to getting their snacks after school or between sports practices. And as you all know, the traffic at that corner is some of the most dangerous traffic, unpredictable. I'm just concerned that of the unforeseen consequences in terms of the safety of our students. Also, I haven't heard it mentioned, I'm very proud that many more of our students now are biking to school. This has really increased in the last decade. And the thought of bicycles turning that corner, and they're now going through the gas station often. I just don't know at this point what a safe, that I foresee problems, potential problems that I think you should really take into account. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the speaker? Okay, Hunter Davis, and you have time seated from Jennifer Gonzalez. You have 6 minutes.
So, are you the pointer? So, everybody's done a great job of comments, and thank you, City Council, for your extensive questioning of particularly the traffic consultant who revealed that they didn't actually study any traffic. They just counted cars on a bell curve, which is not helpful in this situation. But I understand that's the legal process. So I'm going to revisit this issue that really wasn't addressed by the traffic consultant or the architect. This is the driveway. This is the first car you see when you're making this corner. So in a stylized world, when you make this turn, sure, it sounds fine, but you're going to turn and you're going to see a car right here. And that's going to cause reactions wider around the turn. The next slide, please. I think this has been somewhat covered, but this curb that protects the handicap spot and the children, combined with a larger vehicle, this is traced out of their own larger vehicle template, obviously creates a 20-foot wide driveway here, which is meant to be two-way traffic, obviously far too narrow. I think the placement of this curb is underappreciated a little bit because it does block a good chunk of the exit driveway here. So they say we have a 35-foot driveway, but the practical width of that, considering this other curb, which will direct cars more towards the center, is really only 20 feet, and I don't think that has really been discussed at all by the traffic consultants or other circulation people. It works, but it's not good. And then also, if somebody was coming in from this direction, as had been pointed out, cars don't have gas tanks on both sides. If somebody comes in from here and this spot is full and they need to get to a left-hand gas tank, they will need to stop somewhere and wait for this car to leave for them to come in on the left side. There's nowhere for this car to go to make space for the incoming car to get to the left side gas pump. So when we say like this is just stylized, like it's true, but cars have to move both directions along here, and we do have to take into account that cars have gas pumps on only one side. The speaker mentioned the gas station at it's 24 and 680. I go there all the time because my car is diesel. That gas station sucks. Nobody likes it. It's all cramped, but you do what you can because it's cheap and they have diesel. You know, you gotta wait for a pump, you gotta back around, you gotta back down into Mount Diablo Boulevard to get out sometimes. But you make it work, but it's not safe, and it won't be safe with a bunch of kids around. Also, this had been mentioned by a few people. This driveway is extremely dangerous. It's too close to this curb, and encouraging use of this driveway is a mistake. Can I have the next one, please? This highlights this corner. This is the larger car template that the architect failed to put into the engineering drawings, I think somewhat disingenuously. This larger car makes this entrance actually impossible. Whether or not the smaller car is here with the larger car template, this car entering actually bounces off both these vehicles en route to this pump. That seems like a bad idea. I wish they'd use some bigger cars in these fake car templates here, just to show that it does get more congested than using just the smaller vehicle for the parked cars. I think that just shows nothing really can flow around this area. Again, left side pump is a problem. Next one, please. This is the city engineer's own concept, which the architect actually mistakenly thought it was a different drawing. I'm surprised at that oversight. And Councilman Geringer had pointed out that if this car was here, you cannot get into the spot, and that's what will back up. I thought it was interesting to put this other car template here. It's a small car, it doesn't really matter, it blocks the whole thing anyway. This car is waiting to get out. When this will be a problem is at the rush hour times, when these lanes are backed up all the way, this car can't exit, and this car is being told by the city engineer, go around from these pumps, use the city right-of-way. It's not on-site circulation, this is off-site circulation, although they claim the on-site circulation is better. To move out here, this car could be waiting for the stoplight cycle for all these cars to clear. This car now tries to come in here. What's the obvious problem? These cars are all waiting for the stoplight to clear because there's a left turn arrow coming off of Pleasant Hill Road South, or there's cars continuing through the Deer Hill Road intersection. So the exact time when this car is blocking this entrance is the exact time when the traffic is flowing down Stanley Boulevard, creating this massive backup. And this is the solution the city engineer proposes for this exact circulation. It's self-defeating. Next one, please. This is another issue that I don't think has really been addressed enough, but it was addressed in the staff report, which I appreciate. Moving this farther towards the Pleasant Hill Road intersection makes this a turn across 3 lanes instead of just across 2 lanes to get out into the left. The staff report highlights this as a problem. I think it's a significant problem watching the flow of traffic around this area. It's hard to see, but it's important. Next one, please. This is a subtle point, but right here where this current driveway is, this almost creates like a double-controlled 4-way intersection where this keep clear painted section on the street, which is there, that's not just, I didn't make that up, it's painted in front of Akalani's, provides a gap. And that gap provides a lot of visibility for cars exiting from the gas station and a lot of visibility for cars exiting from Akalani's and trying to make this left turn. If we shift this to the right, the visibility when the cars are backed up here is going to be extremely limited out of the Akalani's parking lot, and cars that are turning left are going to have to navigate around a car turning right out of here, which will be turning and accelerating into this left-hand car, which has been left a gap. So this car will think it has the right-of-way. This car will be turning. Right now, there's tons of visibility there. The next slide shows that. If you want to click to the next one, please. I'm sorry, it's reversed. But this is the visibility out of the Akalani's driveway. You can see across into the gas station here. And this is a picture when it's not rush hour traffic, but typically this will get backed up all the way to here, and then it'll be a traffic break here by the Keep Clear section, and the cars will extend down here. You have visibility into the gas station. If this was all covered up by car wash entrance, buildings, et cetera, the driveway would be down here. The cars turning right out of the driveway will conflict with the cars turning left out of here. Right now, it's a four-way intersection, basically, with 2 stop signs. This will turn into 2 3-way intersections within 50 feet of a part, which I just think is dangerous and inappropriate. And the cars turning right out of here, if they're trying to get into the left turn lanes, will then come into conflict with cars turning left out of the gas station. Is that my full 6 minutes? Yes. Okay. May I make one more final point? In the staff report, it says the retail is going from 173 square feet to 271 square feet, even though it's always listed as in-kind retail space at 173 square feet. That additional 100 square feet of retail space will make it a more attractive convenience store with more options and more things for the kids to jaywalk across the street. The exact site design, even though Mr. Bowie denies it, the design of this convenience store and the design of the new facility will make it more attractive for students to jaywalk across from Akalani's because it will be a better store.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Davis. Axel Page. Is Axel Page here? Okay. Bob Sayeth?
Axel Page.
Good.
I would just like to voice my concern for the project as planned and provide my disapproval. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think it's Rob or Bob Sayeth.
Yeah. Good. Bob, Rob, whatever. Hi, I'm Rob Sayeth. I live on 3149 Stanley Boulevard. I'm not going to say anything earth-shattering or new here, but I'm just here to voice my opposition to the plan. I strongly oppose the car wash proposal. I echo all of the same concerns as have been mentioned already, including safety concerns, impacts on traffic congestion, and impacts on property values. It seems clear to me that the only people that stand to benefit from this car wash proposal is the gas station owner and anyone else tied financially to this gas station. And this car wash stands to negatively impact all the nearby residents and anyone who has to navigate the intersection at Pleasant Hill Road and Deer Hill. Again, like I said last time, I also question the need. We have a car wash not far from here, from this proposed site at the Lafayette Car Wash, and then there's also one at the Shell gas station. There is no need, there is no amenity that this gas station car wash would provide the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Kelly Fleming, followed by Eric Kim. Is Kelly Fleming here? Eric Kim.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Eric Kim. I live at 1155 Pleasant Hill Circle, which is a few houses down from the station. I pretty much echo what the other neighborhood members have said about the noise. Another concern I have is the convenience store being open 24 hours. I think they're going to expand that, and just some issues I have with that. I'm currently a sergeant with the Oakland Police Department, so I can tell you firsthand the amount of crime that is associated with late night convenience stores, liquor stores. Prior to moving to Lafayette, we lived in Pittsburgh in the San Marco neighborhood, which is actually a pretty nice part of Pittsburgh. And there was an Arco gas station, small like the Shell gas station, at the bottom of our neighborhood. There was never any issues there. They expanded about 2 years ago to have a very large convenience store upgraded with a car wash, and crime became so bad. I talked to a friend of mine that works with the Pittsburgh Police Department. They actually had to assign a patrol officer there on overtime to deal with fighting, drug dealing, drug use, all kind of other issues, robberies. I know Lafayette is, not exactly like Pittsburgh, but I can still see the issues that could arise from this. I actually just spoke with a friend of mine that's a Lafayette police officer and just got his opinion on this, and he's strongly against it based on noise, traffic. He cited at least a dozen accidents that have occurred at this intersection this year. So, those are some of my issues, and I definitely cannot support any additional growth at this spot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Helena Jones-Kim.
Hi, my name is Helena Jones-Kim. Thank you, council members and mayor, for your time this evening. As my husband just mentioned, we live at 1155 Pleasant Hill Road, and so we've been there for about 3 years now. I'm originally from Richmond, and one of the things that I mentioned when I wrote in is that I remember what it was like growing up near car washes, and as my husband mentioned, the chaos that it would bring, the amount of traffic and activity. And I have 3 boys, and just so proud to be in Lafayette now, and they're able to walk to the gas station. And I just have a concern for my young children being, in that type of environment that is very chaotic. And I'm also concerned for the Akalani students. I mean, we have a lot of our children now, they like to bike, as mentioned, and they're on their phones and they're texting, and it just feels like it is a safety issue and a concern. So, of course, my first concern would be our children, all of our children. Also, I am a real estate professional, licensed broker, as one of the other professionals said, and unfortunately, this is a residential area, and this does affect our values. So we are seeing a lot of upgrades in Lafayette, and we are really trying to just enjoy our communities, adding value to our homes, and this would be a detriment to our home values. And so I guess I'd just like to end it with a want versus a need. I've heard that many times here tonight, and this is not something that we need. This is something that someone else wants, and this can impact our family and our lives. So thank you for your consideration tonight in opposing this.
Okay, thank you very much. Scott Preston, followed by Dana Gold. And that's my last request to speak.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor and council, men and women. Most stuff's been said, but I just wanted to emphasize once again that, the opposing council brought up almost that you guys had a legal obligation to improve this, and that's not true. I think there's nothing in this project that benefits this community. You've obviously heard from the community here. There's no one in support of it. It's not benefited our kids. It doesn't benefit our property values. It benefits one person in a small way financially. I think it's something in my business that's now commonplace now is called ESG. And if you're a pension fund, you will not invest in any company that does not have a socially responsible platform. And you go to any S&P or Fortune 500 company, it'll be the first thing on their investor presentation now. And I would encourage Mrs. Bindal that work with the community. This is something she obviously sees will negatively impact us, yet she's tried to use a legal loophole to continue with the process. We're your patrons, we're your customers. We want you to be successful, but we also want a benefit to our community. There's maybe some options where she could make more money. I don't know, she's across from a school, maybe sell books or something, I don't know, but something that can, uplift the community and she can benefit. I think no one here is against her making additional profits. We're against, negatively impacting our community. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Dana Gold. And that's my last request to speak. If anyone else would like to speak, please fill out a yellow slip.
Do you need my address again?
Say that again?
Address again, or no address?
You don't have to, but you can if you wish.
I'm on Beacon Way in Lafayette.
Okay, speak into the microphone. We can't quite hear you.
The attorney for the applicant pointed out that the issue that was addressed or decided or rezoned several years ago, and I ask as a city, collectively in this room, if critical information presents itself and is readily available, making this proposed development absolutely and without a doubt more dangerous than the existing conditions, do we try it out and wait and see if somebody is hurt, becomes hurt, whether cars can exit, or do we tear it down and start fresh? Where is our responsibility and who do we owe it to? Many arguments or issues that have been raised and remained, and I quote, a mystery to the applicant's legal counsel. I'm not sure, as many others that have spoken, where the mystery lies. We've addressed safety, noise level, property value, increased traffic, ability for egress and ingress, idling cars, etc. The architect himself mentioned that some cars may be able to turn while larger cars may have to back out. We've presented issue after issue, met with plans that simply don't prove facts. There are diagrams that we've discussed are best case scenarios, not addressing real issues at hand. You've heard from architects, legal professionals, real estate professionals, educators, and community leaders in Lafayette that have voiced facts. Our schools are asking and encouraging our students and parents to walk, bike, and scoot to school and reward you with a prize. People come here and stay here for this small town feel. I'm scolded by my first grader if I don't allow him to bike to school, and I'm not sure what to believe if this plan goes through. This issue has not been effectively addressed or mitigated, and shown that additional crosswalk isn't even feasible close by. The crosswalks may pose an additional critical concern, as Justin Horn pointed out, that they must be ADA compliant. And I quote from the Accessible Pedestrian Signals for Best Practices for all signals when they're brought up to code. A standard is an automatic volume adjustment in response to ambient traffic sound level at a maximum volume of 100 dBA. That's not next to a car wash. We heard what it was like to have it at, I believe, 80 or 85 across the hall, and I'm not sure how somebody that is, that may have disabilities would be able to hear that as a real concern when they're trying to get to school, preschool, elementary school, whatever it may be across the street. One other factor that was stated in there, factors that make crossing at a signalized location difficult for pedestrians who have visual disabilities include increasingly quiet cars, because they don't know what's going on, right-hand turn on red, which we know has been proposed at each of those diagrams, continuous right turn movements, complex signal operation, traffic circles, and wide streets. These are just some of the things that I think that we should be taking into consideration as we talk about improving the area in general. Can I finish it out?
I just need you to finish.
Okay. Many questions have asked of the applicant, and their advisors were met with diagrams and the reality that we don't know it until it's built. You met with a Martinez resident that had zero financial or personal gain in spending hours here last month. This is her reality every day, and we ask that you have the ability to prevent it from being our reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you. Anders Cadicito, followed by Melissa Johnston.
So I am Andreas Casito. I live at 3206 Quant Road. I've lived in the hard streets of Lafayette all my life, since 1973. One of the things that I wanted to reiterate is how many people are walking now, how many people are on bikes, how many kids are crossing. I've never seen as many kids as there are today walking all the way past Mount Diablo, going into that Saranap area and such. Everybody's out here. It's super dangerous, it's a chaotic area, and I'm here to express my opposition to this permit and add my family's name to the long list of all these folks that have been out here today. In terms of safety and the well-being of our kids, our communities, our neighbors, I sincerely hope that you turn this project down and deny this permit. Again, in terms of safety and reading these reports, I keep hearing about that this is an insignificant volume increase in traffic, and that may be true in volume, in terms of volume, but it certainly categorically cannot be correct in terms of delay, in terms of how you account for people's behavior, and the net effect that it'll have in queuing and everything that everybody effectively has said. It is dangerous, it's known, it's a bad idea, it doesn't add any real value to this community. So with that said, please put the safety and well-being of our kids, our neighbors first. Please deny this permit. Please consider the overwhelming community outcry, especially from those most affected from this expansion. And with that, it's a cell phone. I'd like to play this, because I think we underestimate what that sounds like. That's a nuisance. That's significant. And according to the volume that we were talking about and how many cars and how many traffic, we're going to see, and it's what, a 5-minute trip through that? Add that up in a given day. That's a lot. And I just hope you deny it and consider our neighbors and consider our community and the health and well-being of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Melissa Johnston, and it's my last request to speak.
Hi, I'm Melissa Johnston. I live at 1166 Pleasant Hill Circle. I'm across the street from the Williams. My concerns are, one, the 24 hours a day. It's not that right now. I'm definitely concerned about crime. I hear the police pull people over sometimes, and you'll hear, get out of your car and things on Fridays and Saturday nights. So I'm worried about a 24-hour market there for that. Secondly, the safety of the kids at the high school. I teach at Spring Hill Elementary. I taught at Lafayette Elementary. I know these kids. I see them. They're in the middle of their brain development. They don't understand what jaywalking is. And I feel like we have to provide a safe environment for our students. And that's part of our responsibility as a community. Third, I can see the gas station from my bedroom. I can see the lights all the time. I live with that. That's a choice I made. But adding more noise to that, I can't imagine hearing the noise, seeing the lights. I love it when I hear the high school. That's a great thing. The high school is awesome. But a car wash, no, that is not. So, thank you. I oppose this car wash.
Okay, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Okay, thank you all for taking the time to come here tonight. We will now go back to the appellant. 5 minutes to rebut and close.
We've heard from some pretty spectacular individuals tonight. We heard from lawyers, we heard from police officers, we heard from former teachers, we heard from people that have lived in the community for decades and decades and decades. And we've heard a lot of consistent comments about not support of this car wash, not support of these circulation changes. So one, I want to thank all of you as the mayor and the vice mayor and the city council members of taking all these comments into consideration. I also know that I've read a bunch of the emails that have come through, the letters that have come in, and it's very consistent there. Everyone is worried about a lot of the same issues, and it's going to have a dramatic effect on not only us as the Williams family, as the individuals that filed this appeal, but as well as the neighborhood. And I love Lafayette more than anybody, or as much as anybody. It's a special place, and we want to maintain that. Really quickly, on the noise front, if you just look at our backyard, currently right now at the retail center, we have a 30-foot long building. It's 14 feet high and about 10 feet deep on the left part, and then about 15 feet deep on the other part. That serves as a really, really, really big buffer for noise, as it is right now. So by moving that current snack shack all the way west of the property, you're now exposing that entire area. And we briefly spoke about that in regards to visually what that would look like. But what we necessarily haven't talked about is all of those noises that currently happen at gas stations, the opening and closing of doors, the chatter, the conversations that we're pretty much protected by having this big building in front of us, now goes away. So you do have the operational noise from the car wash, the blowers, the vacuum, the HVACs, all those new industrial items. But now it's opening up a new door because you're moving an entire building to the left of other noises that we're generally sheltered by right now. So again, some of the comments about a 200 square foot decrease as a potential, that pretty much wipes out everything. We've done 8 projects on our house since we moved in 2011, each and every year. And if that's the case, then all that money that we worked hard for to put back in our house instantly goes away. And that's not fair as a resident in Lafayette. Moving on to the safety front, I read an article the other day about an incident that happened in Morgan Hill. I don't know if anyone is aware of what happened there, but it's a very unfortunate incident. And the city had to settle for a $30 million settlement on October 22nd, 2019. And the cause of this, unfortunately, there were 2 young boys that were critically injured. And it's not about the money, it's about those families and what they had to suffer through and what they had to go through and the community of everyone that knew those families. The reason I highlight that is because, Mayor Anderson, you had mentioned, well, who technically is liable for that? We may not know the answer to that, but the liability and the reason there was a settlement is because there were safety issues that were identified that could have been avoided. We've seen a lot of safety concerns come up tonight. We're across the street from a high school. This would be the worst case scenario for Lafayette. It'd be the worst case scenario for anyone in our community, and that's not something that I ever want to see any of us have to go through as a wonderful community that we have. So again, I want to thank you all for your time tonight. I would really like to see this come to a vote tonight. This has been exhausting for everyone that's been involved in this. I know you spent a lot of time, so again, thank you for listening to all the concerns. I'd like to see this go to a vote tonight. Again, thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you. Questions for the speaker? Thank you, Mr. Williams. The applicant, please, to close 5 minutes.
Probably goes without saying, but this is a gas station that's been there for about 35 years. Ms. Bindal's owned it for about 30 years. And there's really not a change in anything other than the car wash. For example, the actual retail area will shrink by 9 square feet. It's currently 210 square feet. It'll go down to 201 square feet. That detail is found on sheet A 1.1. Also, if in the event there was to be alcohol sales, which there are not, of course, any alcohol sales right now, there has to be notice in a hearing. Ms. Bindal has no intention of going for alcohol sales, so much of the comment and concern about the impact of retail operation really has no application. On top of that, we're not changing it. I've heard talk about safety concerns. There obviously always are safety concerns. I don't minimize those at all. But you can't say that the addition of a car wash is in any fashion going to increase the amount of jaywalking that might take place, because you only use a car wash, obviously, if you've got a car. So it's not going to attract anybody to jaywalk across the street. There was some suggestion, I think, Mr. Mayor, you were the one who made it, that we're actually losing area in terms of circulation. I would suggest to you that's not actually the case. I mentioned that we're adding about 1,366 square feet of building area, but at the same time, we're actually adding about 6,000 square feet of lot area, which currently has never been used. But there's another aspect to that as well. It's sheet SD1, I believe, is the actual site survey. And what everyone is forgetting is that where the queuing area for the car wash is going to be is currently an area where there are parking spaces. As a matter of fact, a couple of the photographs that were put on the screen from the opposition that you looked at this evening indicated that there were cars actually parked there. So in effect, we're not really losing any area for maneuvering, and I would point out to you that there's a solid 30 feet of maneuvering area, which is actually almost twice the width of a two-way private roadway, which we routinely approve here in Lafayette. 16 feet is the standard for a private roadway. That's two-way traffic. This is 30 feet of area. I think that more than addresses circulation. But I would also point out a couple of other things that I always think is interesting. The August 20th, 2018 staff report on the first page makes mention of the fact that other site improvements include improved internal vehicular and pedestrian site circulation, including an accessible pathway for ADA. That was the original recommendation from staff, which was positive. They've, of course, changed that recommendation. In the traffic consultant's report in queue storage, the conclusion made on page 4 is that all of this can be done, quote, without blocking driveways or conflicting with the normal gas station operations. A conclusion there's adequate circulation. The staff report that's before you this evening, prepared by staff, cited the fact that the engineering services staff have made a determination that this was adequate in terms of their review and appropriate and commentary as well. We have a situation here where at least it appears that those who have been consulted on the issue are satisfied that circulation is appropriate. We also have a project architect who specializes in gas stations. He's designed many of them. He's done this in a professional sense. It meets the standards. Concerns about sound certainly are major concerns. I understand that fully. I was puzzled by one thing, and that is the particular memorandum from the sound consultant. They wrote two letters in response to Jonathan Fox's inquiry. One was the one that's in your staff report. There was another that came out, I think, late on Friday. The difference between the two is marked in, and for some reason, I don't know why you didn't get a copy of this, but there's a reproduction of a table which is found in the mitigated negative declaration as well. And that table explains some of question 4, which appears before you, which indicates that the particular site measurement that's done is an extremely conservative site measurement, and then it gives mitigated noise, modeled noise levels without mitigation. And that was not reproduced on the letter that's a part of the site report, but it is a part of the same letter, which is dated November 15, 2019, which did not find its way into that, and I've got a copy here I'll give to staff, and they can make copies for you. I think it probably should have been included. But those the indications are 50.8 is the highest level of sound that's been modeled on a conservative basis, and that's before any kind of mitigation whatsoever. We indicated, as I said, that we would go along with both the 10-foot sound wall. We also would go along with the silencers, and table 12 in the mitigated negative declaration indicates that we're well below every single standard the city of Lafayette has. One last quick comment. I've discussed the findings in my letter. You have them before you. I trust you'll concern yourselves with that. But we mustn't forget the overall ambient sound level of this particular area. This is near Highway 24. It's on Pleasant Hill Road. I cited in my letter the city's own studies, which indicate sound generation from an ambient basis is much greater than will ever be generated by this car wash, particularly with the silencers and the other mitigation measures. I believe this is a project that you properly can approve, and I would ask you to do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for the speaker? Vice Mayor Kendall.
Yeah, so you mentioned another letter. I don't understand this other letter.
Well, to be honest, I was surprised by it as well, but there were 2 letters bearing the same date produced by the noise consultant. One showed up at my office by email, I believe it was Friday. The other is actually part of your staff report, and I don't know what happened with the other one. But the difference between the two, both discuss 4 points, but there's a slight change in the language on point 4, and there's a table, which is the most recent letter, that was left out of the one that's in the staff report, and then there's also a diagram that was a part of the most recent letter. So I know staff has this, but I'm going to be happy to furnish it to staff. They can make copies for your own use as well. But I think it helps answer some of the position that was already elucidated by the sound consultants.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that the original memo produced by Rincon, that was sent to the council, and a follow-up email was sent to the council with the revised letter.
So we have them all. So this isn't something that I thought we had.
Correct.
What he was saying. Okay, good. Thank you.
Mr. Bowyer, before you leave, you asserted that SD1 indicated that with the parking that there was no loss of the overall queuing space. I've just measured it. I hope you would try it yourself. There's a total of 60 feet between the connection, the pipe that protects the pumps, to the end of the existing parking spaces.
I'm going to let the architect.
30 feet between that same point to the current or proposed parking spaces. 30 feet is exactly what the architect has said he has provided as being adequate. Your statement is that there's nothing lost when that dimension goes from 60 feet to 30 feet. I don't understand what you mean by saying that. Can you clarify that, please?
Yeah, I'm going to let the architect clarify primarily, but I looked at it quickly with him in light of your question that you raised earlier, and it appeared to be about 47 feet.
I just measured it 60 feet. Go ahead.
Okay, so the existing site plan between the guard post and the back of the parking, there is parking butting.
I see it. It's right here. It's indicated on the map.
The parking is approximately 18 feet deep, and then the backing of the car is going to require approximately 25 feet. So that's going to be people backing up.
It measures 60 feet from the pipe guard post to the back end of that existing parking.
Yeah, that's going to be an estimate because I don't have a dimension on the plans.
You don't have a what?
Okay. On my site plan, I have the 30 feet between
I understand.
the
Your
raised
proposal.
walk to the guard post at the fueling
Right,
island.
I understand that.
But on the existing,
Yeah.
I don't have.
Well, there's a
specific
scale,
plans
there's a
on
scale right
SD2.
here, and you can very easily scale it and see it's 60 feet. It doesn't take anything special to do that. That's why you have the scale on there.
I would say less, probably in the 40s, looking at the scale here, at the graphic scale. More than 40, probably like 50 feet.
Well, how
I'd
about
say
55?
47.
Let's settle on 55, okay? The point is, it is not the same amount of space. That's what I said to you before, Mr. Bowie. That remains the case. You keep saying it's the same. It is not the case.
Well, a few moments ago, while we were listening to the discussion that was going on, the architect and I scaled it off, and it appeared to be about 47 feet, as he said, maybe 47 to 50 feet. You've got cars and you've got maneuvering space for that. If you deduct that out, there's probably some difference.
Mr. Bowie,
but not a
that
significant
is
difference.
excluding
between
the
the two.
parking that's indicated there. We're talking about the area behind the parking to that guard post. It is, we'll call it 55 feet. You're going to end up with 30 feet. That is less area. I don't see how you can say that's the same or more. You've claimed it's more. What are you talking about?
If you simply take 30 feet, it's almost twice what we use for a standard 2A private roadway of 16 feet.
I understand that, but you have alluded that there is a gaining of space on
No,
this
I've
proposal.
not
Yes, you
meant it.
have. You said it several times. I've written it down.
Yeah, me too.
You have said it several times. So never mind. We don't have to argue about this. I simply have a question. You've answered it. You think it's the same. That's fine. I don't see it. Okay? Are there any other questions for the speaker? Thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll bring it back to the council for discussion and decision. Where are we? Councilmember Geringer, you got something to say?
Yeah, we have it.
So I also do want to hear the discussion of all of my colleagues,
Absolutely.
but I will start off with some of my initial thoughts. And first of all, I do want to thank everyone for coming this evening and for all of the letters that and emails that have been sent, and also for the applicant in the work that you've done in trying to meet the needs of both you and the community on bringing this forward. I know all of these things take a lot of hours, some more than others, but a lot of them take a lot of hours because the quality of life in our community is very important to all of us. And I have experiential, I guess, my biggest concern on this is what I started out with earlier this evening, and that has to do with the actual impacts from the sort of circulation issues of the site on the area around the site. And I get that many experts have looked at it, but we also heard tonight that that the experts didn't look at worst case, and I get that it's not the responsibility necessarily of the applicant to design or beyond what works on the site and what fits there. But in looking at a number of the different exhibits and the information in front of us, it absolutely will create increased, I think, issues that do impact the general kind of welfare of students and people in that area. And I think that it does have an impact on safety. And I drive through there at different times, and where I do have the absolute experience is that making that left turn is already off of Pleasant Hill Boulevard onto Stanley is already difficult. And I'm going to repeat this, but in looking at the way that the circulation flows, there's no way that you can do what the purposes are on the site and not further impact that congestion. And I've seen it at times, absolutely, at the AM and the PM peak hours, and to think that we wouldn't look at those impacts or give priority around those times is concerning to me. I've seen it at different times of the day on the weekends to where I have made the decision to not go there because you can't get in or you have to back out or maneuver around. And so I do think that in spite of the extra work and all of that, I just don't see how the new addition of the car wash and the way the layout is of the circulation doesn't impact that. And so that's one of the areas where I'm having trouble, making a finding on, I'm looking at my notes, on number one, that it's not detrimental to the general welfare, health, and safety. And then I'll wait and hear what others have to say. But I do have concerns about the layout of the project and its impact on circulation.
Vice Mayor Kendall?
Thank you. I won't repeat a lot of things that Councilmember Geringer said, and I do thank you, everyone here, for everybody's work on this. I am extremely concerned about the noise. I have concerns because the manufacturer's numbers are so much higher than our noise specs, and those are the only ones. And without a certified person coming in and certifying that the new numbers are there, I can't make that finding. I'm gonna have a hard time with that. I also totally agree that the most impact for noise will be with the Harveys and with the Williamses, and I don't see a way around that on those particular properties. And I do agree with the realtors' assessments that if they have increased noise over their current levels and it's coming from a commercial source, that will likely decrease their property values. I do have, and I do want to throw my total support to this gas station. My whole family's been using it for decades, and I love, you have a totally valuable service for our community. Given that, if we are going to approve this, I want to go on the record that we are going to have to put on some pretty significant conditions of approval. And I want to make sure that we get back to that if we head down that path. Because I don't want you guys to get in trouble either with the increasing of the noise ordinance. One thing about that buzzer, and I did read our noise ordinance, and I didn't know if anybody else read it the same way I did. I thought it was going to come up, and it didn't, and I apologize for bringing it up so late. But on Section 5-205, Section D, in our noise ordinance, it's at the end, it's after the table. It says, in the event the alleged offensive noise contains a steady, audible tone, such as a whine, screech, or hum, or is an impulsive noise, such as a hammering, or contains music or speech conveying informational content, the standards limits set forth in the table shall be reduced by 5 decibels. And so to me, it feels like that buzzer, if we allow a buzzer that falls into that impulsive noise, and those limits are actually supposed to be less. And I think we ought to consider that, even under the Rincon's analysis, that 5 dB less on that kind of noise is beyond even their specs. I have concerns about this whole 24-hour thing. I think there's some confusion over what it's actually being operated at and the signs at the store. I guess it would get confirmation from the owner saying, is it really been operating at 24 hours for a long time, or is this something relatively new? And I guess those are my big concerns right now.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Bliss.
So I want to first start by just quickly echoing the thanks to the people that came out and spoke tonight from the community, certainly all the consultants that have put in long hours on this project. So I appreciate the expertise that's been brought to bear on this, and also to the property owners, to Ms. Bindal. I certainly understand and appreciate the desire to find a way to use the site that makes it sustainably profitable. And as others have noted, I'm a longtime customer of this site. I've used the gas station many times, and as far as I can tell, it's always been operated with very high standards. So I appreciate certainly that vantage point. But as has been noted many times, including by Mr. Bowie in his letter to us, ultimately these questions to us come down to, can we make the findings that are involved in the approval? And I think certainly I have concerns about some of the nuisance and enforcement issues that have been raised, certainly the noise, obviously the question of 24-hour operation to me raises some questions, but to me it really comes down to just some really serious concerns around public health and safety. I think we're taking a site that already has some serious circulation and safety concerns and just making them even worse. Not just the additional trips, but really the way that the new sidewalk is going to induce even more jaywalking by the kids over at Acalanes. And I can go on. These are all items that have been mentioned already, but I think there's a weird way in which the circulation plan, and with all due respect to the traffic engineer, because I really appreciate the work that went into this, but I think it was clear from the comments tonight that the circulation plan makes a lot of sense sort of in theory and as sort of I hate to say it, but almost as like a geometric exercise in a vacuum. But I think once you place it within the context of this intersection with the school right across the street, it's really hard to imagine that the circulation plan even comes close to working. And I thought the point that was made by one of the members of the public and also by one of my colleagues on council about the fact that we have this on-site circulation plan that actually for certain scenarios depends on a public right-of-way to make the on-site uses as proposed actually work. And I think that's a major concern. It's interesting, one of the biggest issues we've talked about as a council over the last several months has been, traffic on Pleasant Hill Road and thinking about reducing congestion. I'm not talking so much about the fact that this would add to congestion, but when you think about what the opportunities are to us to address that over the long term, I think one of the real key opportunities, which someone mentioned, is this idea of safe routes to school and how do you make it safer for kids to get to school, whether it's walking or biking or whatever. And this, to me, actually takes us very much in the wrong direction on that broader goal for our city. So I think it's clear I have some very serious concerns, particularly from the public health and safety standpoint, probably also I have some concerns maybe secondarily about nuisance and enforcement. So as we currently have this proposal, I don't see myself able to make the findings we need to make.
Thank you for that. And I have to agree with you. I think my biggest problem is really the on-site circulation, which then has effect on off-site circulation and congestion. And I know that we've asked the traffic engineer whether they had actually taken into account the on-site circulation in the detail we've had presented to us, and they didn't have the information. But I think what's interesting is that we didn't even consider delivery trucks, which if you're going to have a market, you're going to have delivery trucks. And that's another vehicle, it's another access that has not been taken into account that begins to make movement on the site difficult. The site has less queuing space, it has less space for cars to avoid going directly on and off Stanley Boulevard because we've constricted the space to put in the market and the access for the car wash. That is a critical difference between what's existing there now and what would be there with this proposal. And to me, it's critical enough that I can't make the findings for this simply on that issue. The circulation is not something I can support because I feel it has a very clear impact off-site. That is what we want to avoid. Is it measurable? I don't know, but I think it's pretty obvious that when you have a site whose internal circulation doesn't work, it does back up onto the adjacent streets. We have examples of that in town already, and this will be another one of those unless it's changed. So I'm really relying more on that as the concern for me on this project than any of the others have been mentioned, but they're all, I think, valid issues. So I guess we're at a point now where we need to decide whether we're going to make a decision on this project tonight, or are we going to look for more information, or what do you want to do? This is the decision point for the council. I would suggest that we may want to take a look through the findings for a denial of the project and see if we've got enough there that we feel comfortable moving forward in that direction. We can talk about what the actual findings are that we have a problem with and why, and begin to get some wording together to reflect that, and see if there's enough there that we feel comfortable, or do we see a need for more exploration, more review, more research on this to give us more information. So I would suggest that might be where we want to begin, but I'm certainly open to other thoughts. Vice Mayor Kendall.
I'm very comfortable moving forward into looking through the findings, even though I'm having trouble pulling them up. So give me a second. Somebody else can go ahead while I'm doing this.
Oh, I'll just, while that is happening, I'll just briefly chime in and say, I would agree. I also am comfortable with us making decisions. I appreciate all the due diligence that's gone into this and the information we've been provided, and all, of course, all the public comment, but I don't, speaking personally, I don't feel the need for further exploration
Okay.
on this. I feel like we have the facts in front of us.
Okay. Councilmember Geringer.
I am in the same position and also still trying to find the findings, but I think that I have enough information to move forward with finding the right language for this.
Okay.
And this being the denial.
Okay, well, I have the list of the findings here. We can kind of go through that. Land use permit may be granted only when the proposed land use, A, is not detrimental to the health, safety, and general welfare of the city.
Yes, okay, me too. I apologize.
I think the question here would be related, once again, I think, to the traffic circulation on-site, which would then reflect onto Stanley Boulevard and even onto Pleasant Hill Road. So I think that would be my major concern in terms of
Correct.
safety and general welfare. The staff position is the proposed car wash and other site modifications would be detrimental to the general welfare, particularly to the adjacent single-family residences. The project would result in cars being queued adjacent to existing residential side and rear yards as they wait for a car wash, emitting noise and exhaust, affecting the air quality. Proposed retail area snack shack will entice high schoolers to cross Stanley Boulevard for snacks and drinks. Experience has shown a high degree of jaywalking and conflict with cars navigating Stanley Boulevard. Design also creates on-site conflicts between pedestrian and vehicular circulation. As pedestrian pathways and driveways intersect, because of additional driveway length needed to accommodate queuing for the car wash, while the mitigated negative declaration of supplemental studies, traffic, air quality, and noise conclude the proposal would lead to less than significant impacts on the environment with mitigation implemented, staff finds that the site design and proposed intensification of the uses on the site is detrimental to the health, safety, and general welfare of the single-family residential units and school uses located directly adjacent to the project site. So I would modify that and basically focus on a couple of things, which would be the actual on-site circulation, as well as the noise. I understand there's exhaust affecting air quality, but I would take that out. The proposed retail will entice high schoolers across Stanley Boulevard for snacks. I think that that's a current circumstance, so I don't really think that this project's going to
Make it
change
more,
that.
right.
So I don't think that's something that's relevant in this particular case. So design creates on-site conflicts between, so the design also creates on-site conflicts between pedestrian and vehicular circulation. I would change that to be conflicts in vehicular circulation. And reduces the area needed to accommodate queuing for car wash.
It can be queuing in general.
Yes.
Queuing for gas too, right?
Area needed. Okay. I mean, it says, while mitigated negative declarations, supplemental studies, traffic, blah, 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 conclude proposal will lead less than impacts. Staff finds static design, proposed pension use, terminal safety. For single-family residential units. Okay, so the last sentence of that would be welfare. School uses located. Okay, I can stick with
That's good. That last one's good. I like
Fine
the
with
last
that.
one, yeah.
I'm fine with that. Okay, so we have, and I can read that back once we get through the whole thing, but I think basically we're eliminating exhaust affecting air quality, the Stanley Blvd snacks and drinks question, but we're focusing in on the design also creates on-site conflicts in vehicular circulation and reduces the area needed for queuing in general. And then it goes on from there. Okay, so then we're good with that. B, will not adversely affect the orderly development of property within the city. Staff's draft is approval of the project will adversely affect orderly development in the city. As currently designed, additional facilities, equipment, ancillary uses are sited on an existing constrained parcel. The project creates pedestrian vehicle conflicts on-site and noise impacts in nearby sensitive receptors. I think I have a little issue with the pedestrian vehicle conflicts, simply because that's current. So I would say it creates on-site vehicle conflicts. Go ahead. Yep.
I think there's elements of the design with the car wash being added that does create new pedestrian vehicle.
I agree.
Okay.
Thank you. And the reduced queuing space.
Yeah, and I'm particularly concerned in the way that, I mean, leaving aside whether kids jaywalk or not, but, you know, even if they come across and they cross at the corner, let's assume that they do, right? Which I'm sure, I know my freshman son does. And then they come down, they either have to come across the parking lot to get to the retail center, kind of diagonally, or they need to come down to where the sidewalk is.
Right.
And even that then is crossing the queuing spot for the car wash. So I think leaving that on there is appropriate.
Well then, what modifications do we need to the staff's draft, which says, approve of the project would adversely affect orderly development of the city. As currently designed, additional facilities, equipment, and ancillary uses are sited on an existing constrained parcel. The project creates pedestrian vehicle conflicts on-site and noise impacts in nearby sensitive receptors. We okay with that as is? Okay.
I'm okay with that.
We'll move on to C. Will not adversely affect the preservation of property values and the protection of the tax base within the city. Staff's draft is no evidence has been provided demonstrating the preservation of property values and the protection of tax base within the city. To the contrary, public testimony has spoken to the project's effects on noise, air quality, and circulation, and the negative effect that car wash impacts would have on preservation of property values in the area. We're all good with that? Okay. D is consistent with the general plan in each element of it and will not adversely affect the policies and goals set forth in the general plan. The draft response for staff is the project is not consistent with policy N-1.2, which states, quote, avoid or reduce noise impacts first through the site planning and project design. Barriers and structural changes may be used as mitigation techniques only when planning and design proves insufficient, unquote. The project cites the car wash, equipment building, and car wash tunnel adjacent to sensitive receptors in the form of a residential development. A 10-foot sound barrier is proposed as mitigation measure, which is inconsistent with policy LU-1 to protect the character of development of residential neighborhoods. Additionally, the applicant is proposing to increase the size of the snack shop office building, which runs contrary to the constraints of the site and realities of adjacent land uses. Now, I believe the size of the snack shop is actually not being increased.
I agree, that last one has to go.
So that comes out.
Because the office space doesn't get counted, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I believe it was the combination.
Of the two?
The resolution, so the combination of, correct, our understanding is the retail amount would stay the same, however, the office would increase, so the combination of office and retail would increase. And I know it's parsing it, and
Yeah,
so I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, that's good clarification. I'm not so concerned about that.
But does it raise to the level of us not being, using that as a finding? And that, so I still struggle with that last sentence, just because I don't think that's negatively impacting it as much as the other things.
Well, that's kind of my sense, is I don't think
Right.
we need it.
I don't think we need that last sentence.
Right, that was my sense.
Yeah,
So
me too.
I've taken it out.
Perfect.
Additionally on is out.
Perfect.
So the question then for me is, a 10-foot sound barrier is proposed as a mitigation measure, which is inconsistent with policy LU-1 to protect character development of residential neighborhoods. Now, that's kind of the aesthetic question on the sound barrier. And I'm really not seeing that as being valid in this particular case, so we should take that out.
I agree.
Thank you.
You there?
I'm pulling that, yeah.
Okay, let me take that out. Okay, so we have left for D, the project is not consistent with policy N-1.2, which states avoid the reduced impacts. First, through site planning and project design, barriers and structural changes may be used as mitigation techniques only when planning and design proves insufficient, unquote. The project cites the car wash, equipment building, and car wash tunnel adjacent to sensitive receptors in the form of residential development, and that would be it.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, E will not create a nuisance or enforcement problem within the neighborhood. Expansion and relocation of the retail space towards Stanley Boulevard will encourage jaywalking and loitering from students at Alcalanas High School. Residences adjacent to the subject property's southern and eastern property line will experience negative noise impacts in proximity to the car wash facility. So for me, the issue is more off-site congestion and circulation problems based on on-site lack of circulation more than the loitering and the jaywalking. But I'm willing to keep that in there if you like. Go ahead.
My preference there would be to delete the loitering part, because I don't think that's going to be necessarily increased. I do think, as I mentioned earlier, and even just based on the site drawings, when you think about where a potential crosswalk, even if it were put in place, would be, and how then people would be induced to walk directly to, across to the sidewalk. I am concerned that jaywalking would actually be potentially worsened, so I'd want to leave that in for that finding.
So expansion, relocation of retail space towards Stanley, expansion, excuse me, take that out. Relocation of retail space towards Stanley Boulevard will encourage jaywalking from students at Alcalanas High School, okay? Then I would want to add in reduction of on-site queuing area will result in off-site congestion impacts. How's that sound?
Yes.
Okay. And then the question is, do you want to keep in residences adjacent to the subject property's southern and eastern property line will experience negative noise impacts in proximity to the car wash facility? We can leave that in.
It's true, but I don't know if it applies in this section. That's my only,
All right, you want
I don't know where.
You want it in or out?
I like it in.
Okay, done. F, will not encourage marginal development within the neighborhood. Approval of the project could encourage marginal development within the neighborhood. The project design leads to on-site circulation issues and noise impacts to nearby sensitive receptors. The introduction of more impactful non-residential land use in the form of a car wash would result in less desirable residential development in close proximity to the gas station / car wash. So on that one, I would stick with the on-site circulation issues for sure. And we can keep the noise impact from nearby receptors. Structure is more impactful, non-residential landlord. Yeah, I think, I would say the introduction of a more impactful non-residential land use in the form of a car wash
Could, yeah, change the would to could. Thank you.
result in less desirable residential development in close proximity to the gas station / car wash. Good?
Yeah.
G is consistent with the purpose section of the zoning district in which it is located. The existing use of automotive servicing is permitted by right and has been determined to be compatible with the purposes and intent of the zoning district to provide a limited number of commercial uses that primarily serve residents and motorists in the northeastern sector of Lafayette. Conditional uses such as automotive cleaning may be acceptable but require more detailed analysis. Potential impacts from surrounding land uses. Such conditional uses may be permissible based on characteristics of the site, size, orientation, access, etc., and proposed design. Based on the specifics of the site and the proposed scope of the design, it may be that the impacts are such that the Planning Commission cannot make the findings required to grant a land use permit. The proposal before the Commission at this time falls into that latter category. So what we have is basically the City Council, not
Right.
Planning Commission.
Right.
And proposal, council. Okay, it's a long paragraph. It seems like it could be a lot shorter, but we can just leave it that way unless there's some changes people have in mind.
Fine.
I don't know
Okay.
how else to do it. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
So we also will need to approve and adopt the mitigated negative deck regardless. So that is on here. That's fine. Okay. So I'm looking over to staff now. I think what we have is kind of flushed out our basis for a denial of the project. Is there something more that we need to consider before we actually vote on this?
I don't think so. I think at this point, we'd recommend that, based off of the comments you've provided, we prepare a resolution of denial and bring that back to you at your December meeting.
All right, that sounds reasonable to me. Okay? Would you want us to vote on it now and you'll bring it back, or do you simply want to bring it back and we'll vote on it then?
I think you'll need to vote on it then.
Okay.
But I think based off of the comments, we'll bring back a resolution and address the findings as you said,
Okay.
as you've mentioned and as you've mentioned in your earlier comments.
So we've given you direction. And it is for a denial of the project.
That is correct.
Okay, excellent. All right, well then, this will come back to our meeting on December 9th.
And I think if you could close this public hearing, we would probably bring back that resolution on consent. You and the public would have the opportunity to pull it if you had any revisions.
Okay, all right, well then, we will close the public hearing, and we will bring this back to our meeting on December 9th as a consent calendar item, a denial of the project. Okay? Direction from staff, you've got it? Everyone here is nodding? Good? Okay. Thank you all very much. We appreciate your time. And with that, we are adjourned. It's a one-topic meeting. Can you beat that? Okay. Well done.
Thank you, Mayor.
Nothing like a nice piece of paper.